Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting for June 22nd, 2026. I did want to note Councillor Dunstall sent her regrets. I believe she has a grandchild's graduation this evening, so she is forgiven for not being here. But I would look for a mover and a seconder to call our meeting to order at 7 p.m. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. I will invite Councillor Martin to read our territorial land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. We've gathered in Wilmot Township on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community.
Thank you, Councillor. We do have 3 additions to tonight's agenda, and they're all under 9.2, which is specific interest delegations. So when it is the appropriate time on those items, I will call up those delegates. No other additions, so I'd be looking for the adoption of the agenda and noting that I'd like to move up item 8.1, which is the Community Grant Award recipients, to be dealt with first, just so that those who have carved out some time for that opportunity don't need to sit through the rest of the meeting if they aren't able to. So I'll look for a mover. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Okay, seeing none. We do have our minutes from the previous meeting of May 12th, which was the special, May 21st, which was the special council meeting, and the minutes of the May 25th regular council meeting, and the minutes of the June 1st committee of the whole to be adopted as presented. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu. All those in favour? That carries unanimously. So now I would like to call up all of the 2026 community grant recipients. This evening we do have most of the organizations present, but for those that weren't aware, Council has granted money to various organizations to help support them with community-based efforts and programming throughout Wilmot. So we have the Wilmot Agricultural Society, the Baden Community Association, Community Care Concepts, Dundee Artisan Festival, Grand River Friendship Society, Interfaith Community Counseling, Link, Mannheim Optimist Club, New Dundee Board of Trade, New Hamburg Art Tour, New Hamburg Concert Band, the recreation subsidies that we provide through the Rec Centre, Nith Valley Eco Boosters, Wilmot Terry Fox Run, the Garden Wilmot / Wilmot Horticultural Society, Wilmot Lions and Lioness Club, Wilmot Senior Woodworking and Craft Centre, Waterloo Oxford District Secondary School, Waterloo Region Community Garden Network, Waterloo Regional Police Services, Wilmot Wellesley Resource Centre, Wilmot Girls Hockey Association, and last but certainly not least, the New Hamburg Legion. So I would invite, if you are one of the groups, to please come up. We're going to do a group photo here along with Council.
Go ahead, Sam. Your photographers are very quiet. Kristen, have to step in. Perfect. Good. Wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you again to everyone who came out for the community grants. You're of course welcome to stay. We have quite the agenda this evening, but I also understand if you have other things, including potentially the Jays game, to go home and watch. With that, we will jump into our public meetings under the Planning Act. We have a few public meetings this evening. The first one is item 7.1. And this is a meeting under the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of this meeting is to consider the zone change application 04-26-2342 Snyder's Road East. And this is under report DS-2026-09. And I will now invite Cameron Miller, our Senior Development Planner, to provide an overview of this application.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mayor Salonen. Yes, this application is proposing to reduce the minimum lot area and lot frontage requirements for an agriculturally zoned lot, Zone 1, and approval of this application would facilitate a future severance of the property to create a new residential lot. So Zone 1 sets out that any new lot created by severance must possess a minimum lot area of at least 40 hectares or 230 meters of frontage. So given it's a significant reduction, it's being brought to council for a zoning amendment. Notwithstanding that, there are policies in our current official plan as well as draft policies in our new official plan that allow for rural infilling on lands that are designated as rural areas in the township official plan for which these lands are designated as. And again, so therefore a zoning amendment would be required to reduce these, the frontage requirement and the lot area requirement. In support of the application, the applicant's undertaken some technical review, such as a hydrogeological assessment, which demonstrated there would be no detrimental impact on groundwater. In addition to that, the hydrogeological assessment was scoped to the realistic development of the property, which is intended to be a maximum of a single detached dwelling with the potential for a basement apartment. So the hydrogeological assessment was scoped to reflect the intended development of the site. And so the recommendation includes wording that the property will be placed into a holding provision until such time that they do additional technical work, which would allow them to go above and beyond a single detached dwelling with an additional dwelling unit on each property. I'll leave my comments rather brief. The applicant is also intending to provide a brief overview as well, so I don't want to duplicate much of what will be said there, but I'm happy to answer any questions as well if there are any.
Thank you very much. Council, are there technical questions for Cameron on this item? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I think in terms of visiting the site and looking at the drawings here, it almost looks like the property to the east of this was pretty much the exact same request that went through maybe a couple decades ago. Or is that fairly accurate? Just putting it down the middle.
Through Mayor Salonen to Councillor Wilkinson, that is correct. That property was severed almost identical of size about a decade ago. The previous council approved an application a little bit more to the east, 2372 Snyder's Road East, about 3 years ago for an identical application as well. So this is one of the areas in the township where this rural infilling is permitted.
Any additional questions, councillors? I did have two. Just in terms of, I did see the residents' comments that they did provide about neighboring properties. Were those specifically addressed through this? Again, I also drove by it on Snyder's Road, but I'm not an individual living right next to this proposed development.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Mayor Salonen. So this application doesn't contemplate necessary building footprint, building area. What's been presented tonight is entirely conceptual. It could change. So the house could be a tenth of the size in theory. So again, this is just contemplating lot area reductions and lot frontage reductions. So those, if we were contemplating a reduction in setbacks, certainly that's something we would have directly addressed in the report, but otherwise they're building something that they could otherwise be building.
Perfect. And my second question, because I've become a semi-regular expert in water, I do know that there's obviously one well as it's currently one existing property. Would the second property be required to then drill their own well so they're not relying on the neighbor's property?
Through you, Mayor Salomon, an additional well will be drilled for the severed property. Those are items that were looked at as part of the hydrogeological assessment. So it looks at neighboring wells in the area's impact on surrounding properties. So there's an inventory through that assessment of all wells in the area.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Okay, seeing no questions, we do have Dylan Schnurr, who is here this evening to present. So Dylan, please do come up. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Alrighty, good evening, Mayor, members of Council and Township staff. My name is Dylan Schnurr. I'm a planner and urban designer with GSP Group in Kitchener, and I'm joined with my colleague Michael Whitmer, who's a senior planner with GSP Group. We've been retained by Bogdan Pelczar to submit the zoning bylaw amendment application in support of the severance of the property located at 2342 Snyders Road East in the Township of Wilmot in the former settlement of Waldo. We've reviewed staff's report, and comments are in support of staff's recommendation for approval. As an overview of our delegation, we will highlight the existing planning policies that are applicable to the site, the development concept plan, the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, an overview of the application submission materials, and conclusions before being available to answer any questions. In the Township of Wilmot official plan, the site is currently designated rural areas with the protected countryside overlay. Residential lot creation is permitted within an existing cluster of rural residential lots, and there are long-standing residential uses on and adjacent to the site along Snyders Road East, forming the former settlement of Waldo, and the residential uses along Snyders Road East in proximity to the site are compatible with the surrounding agricultural uses, and the severance of the site will be compatible with these surrounding residential uses. In the zoning bylaw, the site is zoned agricultural Z1, which permits single detached dwellings. In the zoning bylaw, due to the site's existing area of approximately 8,000 square meters, it is defined as a recognized lot of up to 1.2 hectares, which is generally more geared towards residential uses in terms of permitted uses compared to larger parcels, which are primarily sized for agricultural purposes. This zoning bylaw amendment is required to facilitate the severance of the site into two parcels. So the development concept plan reflects the request of the zoning bylaw amendment, including a lot area of 0.39 hectares and 0.39 hectares, respectively, as well as a lot frontage of 27.4 meters and 27.4 meters, respectively. This application will include the demolition of the existing dwelling on the site, and both lots will utilize individual private servicing, and a 4.10 meter road widening will be conveyed to the region of Waterloo. And development of the site has been designed to mimic the adjacent development to the east of the site. So shown in the presentation are the properties located to the east of the site at 2348 and 2356 Snyders Road East. So it was a previous zoning bylaw amendment and severance to permit a minimum lot frontage of 26 meters, as well as a lot area of 0.26 hectares. Similarly, this application included a road widening conveyed to the region of Waterloo, and the proposed zoning bylaw amendment and severance for 2342 Snyders Road is consistent with the surrounding residential development. As mentioned, to implement the severance, the zoning bylaw amendment will add a site-specific provision to the agricultural zone to permit a minimum lot frontage of 27.4 meters, whereas 230 meters is required, and to permit a minimum lot area of 0.39 hectares, whereas 40 hectares is required. As mentioned previously, these zoning regulations are geared towards agricultural uses, which are characterized by large parcel sizes with large frontages. With that being said, the site is more geared towards residential purposes, having long-standing residential uses on the property, while being in an area adjacent to residential uses, which is known as the former settlement of Waldo. Currently, the site has an area of approximately 8,072 square meters with a frontage of approximately 55 meters, making it undersized with respect to these zoning requirements for agricultural uses. As mentioned previously, the proposed development along Snyders Road is consistent with surrounding development patterns. As touched on by Cameron, the zoning bylaw amendment will include a holding provision for the purposes of limiting the development of the property to one single detached dwelling and one additional dwelling unit attached until the additional hydrogeological assessment has been completed to the satisfaction of the township. The hydrogeological scope was limited to one single detached dwelling and one attached additional dwelling unit. If the applicant or any prospective potential buyer in the future wish to add greater than one additional dwelling unit or any detached additional dwelling units, they would be required to retain a hydrogeologist to confirm that the site can support the additional use from a servicing perspective. In support of the zoning bylaw amendment application, GSP Group submitting a planning justification brief, which notes that the zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the provincial planning statement and conforms to the Township of Wilmot official plan. GSP Group conducted a review of the second draft of the Township of Wilmot official plan and noted that it conforms to this official plan as well. Additionally, as mentioned by Cameron, a scoped hydrogeological study was prepared by Chung and Vander Dolen Engineering and was subsequently peer-reviewed by the Township's engineering consultant, Blue Metric, on May 13, 2026. And the hydrogeological study concluded that no detrimental impacts to groundwater quantity to nearby groundwater uses are expected, and 2 lots, each with a single family dwelling, a water supply well completed in the deeper aquifer on the site, and a tertiary septic system with a conventional septic distribution system would be supported. Overall, from a site servicing perspective, the zoning bylaw amendment and severance are supported. Additionally, a conceptual site plan was submitted in support of these applications, and of note, on the site plan, the proposed building locations were selected for conceptual purposes, and these may or may not be the final locations of the proposed dwellings. The dwellings shown in the site comply with the existing agricultural zoning permissions, such as the minimum front yard, minimum side yard, and minimum rear yard setbacks, as well as the requested site specifics for minimum lot area and lot frontage. Once building permits are applied for, the township will ensure that the proposed dwellings comply with the zoning permissions that apply to the parcels. Overall, the zoning bylaw amendment is consistent with the provincial planning statement and conforms to the Township of Wilmot official plan and the second draft of the Township of Wilmot official plan. It facilitates appropriate rural residential growth within the existing cluster of rural residential lots in the formal settlement of Waldo. The proposal is consistent and compatible with adjacent development, including 2348 and 2356, which is directly east of the site and has undergone a similar process. The zoning bylaw amendment was submitted concurrently with the consent application to sever the site, which will be considered at the July 8th Committee of Adjustment hearing. Thank you, and we now welcome any questions from council or staff.
Thank you very much, Dylan. Are there questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I did make a note. I wanted to ask this. Why is the road widening taking place? What was the purpose of that?
Yeah, through you, Ms. Mayor, maybe I could defer to staff.
Sure. Through Mayor Salmon and Councillor Wilkinson, that's a condition of consent from the Region of Waterloo. It's fairly typical. Anytime the Region of Waterloo has the opportunity to take a road widening where there's been it doesn't meet the current width in their guidelines, they'll take a road widening, and so they've done that as a condition of consent for a future severance.
Any additional questions, Council? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much again, Dylan, for joining. Now, this is, again, an official public meeting, so I would ask, are there any persons present who would like to speak first in support of the application that are present this evening? Are there any online who are wishing to speak? Okay. Are there any persons present who would like to speak in opposition to the application this evening? And are there any online? Okay. And one last time, is there anyone present this evening that would like to speak either in favor or opposed to this application? Okay, and I'm assuming that's not changed online either. Okay. Thank you very much. So this public meeting is now officially closed. Council, we do have a recommendation before us this evening, and that is that this report for the zone change application for 2342 Snyders Road East be received for information, and that Council approve the zone change application 04-26 by GSP Group Incorporated to 1, reduce the minimum lot area and frontage requirements for a lot within Zone 1, and to replace the holding symbol on the property to limit development on the property to 1 single detached dwelling and 1 additional dwelling unit until additional hydrogeological assessment is completed to the satisfaction of the township. May I have a mover to get this on the floor? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. We will now move on to 7.2, and again, this is a public meeting under the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of this meeting is to consider the general zoning amendment for residential use in Zone 12, which is known as institutional zoning, and this is Report DS-2026-10, and I will now invite up Andrew Martin, our Director of Development Services, to provide an overview of this report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. So the report before you explains the processes we've undertaken to review institutional zoning. Council will recall passing an interim control bylaw in November of 2025 to essentially pause the establishment of new residential uses within institutional areas. There are a number of institutional properties across the township, both in urban settlements, rural settlements, and outside of settlement areas in general. And the current wording in Zone 12 doesn't provide clear guidance of where uses are appropriate. So through the official plan process, the township was undertaking and continued to undertake a review of housing needs and appropriate locations. And then we drilled down a little bit closer to see how that would apply to institutional areas. So before you, the draft bylaw updates language that we currently have in the institutional zone to modernize current language, outdated terms to modern terms, and defines some additional uses that may or may not have been permitted in the previous institutional zone, depending on interpretation. And those areas specifically relate to emergency shelters and rehabilitation treatment centers and recovery facilities. So those defined terms are proposed to be introduced within the zoning to allow a framework for their consideration in the future through site-specific development applications. What's occurred through this process is we've essentially taken the current uses within Zone 12 and we've broken them into three categories. What would be permitted everywhere in the township in an institutional zone, so that would be urban settlements, rural settlements, and on agricultural areas. What would be permitted in a rural settlement area and what would be permitted in an urban area. And essentially those considerations are about size of property services available, proximity to other resources, whether it be transit, active transportation, commercial uses, places of employment, places to eat, and essentially reviewed what uses require what associated services. So out of that, the refined zoning looks at generally what's permitted in rural areas, so outside of settlement areas right now, rural churches, rural schools, that would continue to be there. Then looks at other more intensive uses, so retirement homes, clinics, which could occur in like a rural settlement area where there may not be as many services, but it is more compact and in closer to proximity. And then looks at more intensive uses, such as long-term care facilities and hospitals that we currently see, like in a New Hamburg urban area, for instance, with Nithview, where it's appropriate given there's active transportation options, transit options, places to shop, work, etc. So basically taken our current zoning and framed it based on our geographic area and what would be appropriate in what locations. So we have engaged through the process. Notice of this meeting was posted in the Wilmot Tavistock Gazette on May 28th. Staff have verified that it did appear in that edition. We've also had information within our Engage page specific to this review since that time. We did receive comments from one representative of a property owner in St. Agatha, just looking at the way we had proposed language, and some of the language spoke to people, and there was some concern that perhaps we're zoning for people as opposed to land uses. So they proposed some language which removes the people from the equation and drills down on the specific land use, which achieves the same outcome as what staff had proposed and we do feel is appropriate. So the bylaw being considered tonight addresses those comments that were received through the process. They received after the report was written. That's why I'm providing that verbal update, but essentially the bylaw that's considered takes into account verbatim the language that was proposed in those comments. So it achieves the same outcome. better refines institutional zoning throughout the township, and from a staff perspective certainly is an appropriate step forward, and then would allow council to repeal the current interim control bylaw with the passing of this zoning. And that would allow, uses to proceed again in institutional areas in accordance with the framework proposed by this report and bylaw. I'll leave my highlight at that. Certainly here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are there questions? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I suppose more of a comment. I appreciate the overview and the work that went into this, and I would agree, I think, in reading the report, the amendments, and the bylaw, and even seeing the update that came through today after the comments from the legal teams, it certainly, I think, better defines and reflects where institutional zoning should be applicable within the township, and obviously taking into account the distinction sort of between rural settlement and urban areas. So very happy to see it. And I don't have any questions. I just appreciate the work that went into it, because I know this was a very quick process that had to be done. So thank you.
Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, to Director Martin. In looking at the chart, the one that I did have some question about was retirement residential facility in a settlement area. I didn't cross-reference it directly, but I would view settlement area doesn't include wastewater treatment, and I'm wondering about how, would there be limits on the size of that retirement residence? Or I guess I went to a high school that didn't have wastewater treatment, and we weren't told not to flush the toilets. So, but I guess we weren't living there 24 hours and taking, well, we did take showers after gym, but we won't go into all the detail of my high school experience. But I'm just wondering the appropriateness of a retirement facility in an area where there isn't wastewater treatment. That's basically my question.
Through Mayor Armstrong, going back a number of years there, Mayor Salon, and I don't know what I was thinking, but I'll regroup and get my thoughts here. Essentially through any process to either construct or convert an existing building, through that process, there would be a requirement to look at available services. And certainly the size and scale of what would be permitted would only work based on what services are available. So we do have some instances where there are retirement residential uses in unserviced settlement areas, ones that have water but not wastewater. But essentially there is a process, through new construction, through site plan approval and building permits to confirm the adequate services are available. But when looking at it, comparing like a retirement residential versus a traditional long-term care facility, the implications and standards and size and scale are certainly can operate at a smaller scale for retirement residential than long-term care, and that's why we've provided that distinction of where they might be located.
Follow-up
Thank
question? You. Okay. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay. I just also wanted to note, thank you very much to staff. I know council brought on the interim control bylaw with hopes of being able to get clarity on this, and I really think that this achieved the clarity that council was seeking. So really appreciate the work that the team put into that. Again, this is a public meeting under the Planning Act, so I will ask, are there any persons present who would like to speak in support of this bylaw update? Seeing none, are there any online? None online. And are there any persons present who would like to speak in opposition to this report? Seeing none, are there any online? There are none online. And lastly, is there anyone present who would like to speak to this report? Okay, yes, Stephanie Gertz. And if you could just provide your contact details to our deputy clerk on your way out. You can speak first, but thank you.
Thank you. Do I have, how much time I have?
technically under a planning meeting, under the Planning Act, there is no time limit.
Okay, I'm not long, don't worry.
Okay.
I planned for only 3 minutes, so it's just, okay. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I would like to speak about the proposed changes related to the residential uses on Z12 institutional lands. Before I comment on the proposal, I would like to outline a few assumptions, just so that we're clear on everything. Number one is, in the proposal, it did state that a notice of a public meeting was provided in the May 28th edition of the Wilmot Tavistock Gazette. I'm not sure if there could be clarification, but I'm hoping maybe by the end of this that you'll understand my rationale for why I'm asking about what type of notification there was. And, you know, was it for this meeting, was it for the proposal, or was it for the official plan? As well as, again, clarifications. I guess the next one is so I'm going to make some assumptions here because I read the proposal and I've talked to several councillors and there's different opinions of what different things are defined as or what they mean. So I'm hoping that I'm going to clearly outline what my beliefs are. So it's my belief that in the proposal, when it states urban areas, it's referring to the urban area designated in the official plan for maps for Baden and New Hamburg. This means that the urban areas would be relatively, I'm not using distinct streets, relatively downtown New Hamburg and downtown Baden. My second assumption is that when you state settlement areas, you're referring to such communities as St. Agatha, New Dundee, Mannheim, and Petersburg, and you're referring to, in the official plan, the areas designated as settlement areas. Again, that would be more or less downtown those areas. If my assumptions are correct, then I'll continue. It's not correct? Okay, you go. It changes my argument if it's not correct. Go ahead.
Okay, normally delegations aren't meant to be a back and forth or a debate with staff, so if you want to share your comments, I think you know which direction to take them, and then I will have staff just answer afterwards.
Absolutely. So if my assumptions are based on this report that's released, and it says anywhere, then settlement, then urban, and in here you reference official plan several times, so I'm assuming that the settlement areas and the urban areas were designated via the official plan. But my comments and concerns relate to that. It's that I'm also making the assumption that long-term homes then would only be permitted in the institutional lands designated as urban areas in Baden and New Hamburg, and that retirement facilities would only be permitted in urban and settlement areas in Baden, New Hamburg, Petersburg, St. Agatha, and Suchworth. Based on the mapping of the official plan and the proposed official plan, this would greatly reduce the land availability for retirement homes and long-term care homes. My concern is that these changes would, when we're looking to the future of Wilmot Township, that this really limits how much focus we're going to be spending on these two facilities. So at a time when the township's housing needs report specifically identifies the need for additional housing, senior housing, and notes that additional policy direction was needed to address Wilmot's aging population, this proposal, I feel, greatly reduces the amount of retirement and long-term care facilities that Wilmot will be created. I'm also concerned that Council may not have heard from organizations that already own institutional lands to see about how they view they would use the space. A number of churches are already converting their churches or part of their church land to assisted living or long-term care or retirement homes when they see they have excess property. And I think that before this change could be made, those conversations need to have happened, as well as potentially talking to the retirement home operators across Waterloo Region, as long-term care providers across Waterloo Region. Again, this proposal states that the reason why they are restricting the areas of retirement facilities and long-term care facilities is because they believe that those areas need to have specific services available to them. So this is not about wastewater or water or utilities. I'm not suggesting that we need to tear up farm fields and drop in a retirement home or a long-term care home in the middle of a field. but I am saying that there's lots of locations in New Hamburg or in Baden or in St. Agatha that, if was used for institutional long-term care or retirement homes, could be a viable location. But like I was saying, that if you're really restrictive into that size, I think you're going to have a really hardship in the coming years. And I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. I will turn it over to our director to address, I think, some of those questions that came up.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. The notice was in the May 28th Wilmot Tavistock Gazette, as per the requirements. The Planning Act, it was specific to consideration of amendments to Zone 12, so it appeared on page 10 of the Gazette, and there was a specific notice that spoke to exactly what we're talking about today, just to be clear on that. And then through our traditional communication forum, which is Wilmot, the Engage page, where we post all our development applications and land use planning considerations, the information has also been present on there. The other component, when we talk about urban and settlement areas, so the urban area is the entirety of Baden and the entirety of New Hamburg. So those are the township urban areas, so not just the cores, the entire areas, similar to settlement areas. So it's the entire rural settlement, not just the core areas. So we haven't limited any potential areas within those urban or rural settlement areas, and essentially have the uses that we've indicated there are reflective of what we see already in those areas. So not really changing anything, not reducing the limitations. Really the only area that potentially has changes in what could be permitted is within outside of those settlements. So a small institutional property, a small rural church, where limitations in servicing and the ability to provide adequate parking and the types of roads that are connecting those areas, more intensive uses wouldn't be appropriate. We've pulled back the proposed uses. Certainly it doesn't negate the opportunity for anyone to make an application to amend the zoning should there be an appropriate land use consideration. But really from a prospective use of those areas, the zoning does reflect what reasonably would be appropriate based on the geographic location. So we've maintained the flexibility though in the areas of kind of rural and urban areas, the settlement areas specifically, to allow for the uses that we're already seeing in those areas and flexibility for where they could be located.
Thank you very much, Director, and thank you, Stephanie. And if you can just provide your contact details to our Deputy Clerk. Are there any other individuals that would like to speak to the report that are present? Okay, seeing none. Any online? There are none online. So this public meeting is now officially closed. And Council, we now have the recommendation before us that report DS-2026-10, general zoning amendments, residential uses in Zone 12 institutional, be received for information, and that Council approve amendments to the Township zoning bylaws as outlined in Attachment A, and that Council repeal interim control bylaw 2025-75. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin. And any comments or questions? We'll go to Councillor Cressman and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Yes, excuse me. Trying to recenter my comments through you, Mayor. I can use the example of Maple Heights and New Dundee as a seniors residence in a settlement area. Certainly there has been some experience with wastewater treatment, and they're trying to work through a plan there. But one of the issues is, as well, as we look at this, is transportation, and that's a challenge without regular transportation. So I think as we look at senior populations, and as they are either have access to a car, but then that is eliminated, and as they move into a stage where they are in need of transportation, then I think that's part and parcel of where we look at appropriate locations for these retirement residential facilities. So I thought this was excellent. It laid it out well, and I think it arrived at an endpoint that makes sense.
Very good. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I wouldn't have too much to add to what my colleague Councillor Cressman has just hit on, but I think that the key thing here is looking at availability of amenities, transportation, active transportation I know was mentioned as well, but it really pushes that you want those maybe higher density or larger institutions to be located within urban areas where you would have that readily available, but also wouldn't necessarily be constrained by the servicing issues that we would see in the settlement areas. So I think it's appropriate, and even hearing the comment that you would look at maybe some rural churches that may be changing what their idea of land is and how they're utilizing it. It's not necessarily preventing them from doing something on a smaller scale that I think would maybe still be welcomed by these communities and areas. But again, it takes into account and looking at what servicing is available, what amenities are available. So I would agree, it's well thought out and well defined.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, it's already been moved and seconded. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to our third public meeting for this evening, and this is again a public meeting under the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of this meeting is to consider the official plan amendment application 02-26 and a zone change application 03-26 for 67 Beck Street, Baden, and this is report DS-2026-11. I will now turn it back over to Director Martin to provide an overview of this application.
Thank you, Mayor Solomon. The application before you deals with property in Baden. It's formerly the silos related to master feeds that were demolished a number of years ago. That property is sat vacant and certainly been contemplated for redevelopment for some time, which is what's resulted in the application before you today. The application proposes to change the current designation to urban residential in the current framework of our official plan. In the draft new official plan, the designation would be mixed use, which would allow for a mixture of residential, commercial, and associated uses, light industrial, essentially reflective of what we see in that area right now. Depending on the order of operations, it may or may not require an official plan amendment if the new official plan is in place before this development application were to be dealt with finally. But the framework is in the application to address both scenarios. The zoning application deals with a specific proposal, which is for 66 residential units in the form of cluster townhomes and stacked townhomes. Access points being provided to both Beck Street and Charles Street. The application would include the construction of could be a long-term temporary turning facility at the end of Beck Street. Beck Street's only partially constructed at this point, so the development concept provides room for a proper turnaround facility for access to the site for emergency vehicles, for waste vehicles as well. At such time as Beck Street were to be extended through in the future, the opportunity would then exist to remove that temporary turning facility, which would actually, based on the concept, introduce additional parking for the development. The application does propose some amendments to the bylaw reflective of buildings closer to the street, somewhat consistent with the setbacks of buildings in the area right now. The Charles Street setback looks like it's a larger reduction, but that is as a result of a road allowance widening that would be taken. So essentially, in order to keep the building close to the new property line, that reduction seems a little bit larger, but it's reflective of the modified property line that would occur should this application be approved. The setbacks are consistent for residential development, and there is a request to reduce parking. We do talk a little bit about it in the application. Essentially, the traffic impact study did look at the parking ratios for the type of land use, reflecting the type of ownership, the number of vehicles that are being witnessed in similar type developments, and ultimately resulting in a proposed reduction to 1.2 parking spaces per unit. We have seen that in other developments in Baden already. So there's been consideration for reductions to those parking numbers in the past, but certainly that consideration is here before council as well, and supported by a traffic impact study and parking analysis that was prepared in support of the application. At this point, the report is just for information to hear a public meeting, any additional comments that we may receive. The technical review has been completed, a noise study undertaken to demonstrate land use compatibility with some mitigation measures to be dealt with through the design and construction of the buildings. Archaeological work has been completed and for the site, and preliminary engineering to demonstrate that lot grading, drainage, servicing could function in the property. Should the application be approved in the future, the next step would then be a site plan approval process where the finer details would be dealt with, easements, conveyance of land, the proper language to secure that temporary turning facility. All of those aspects would be dealt with through a future site plan application. I believe the applicants may be here to speak more to the application as well, so I will leave some areas for them to comment on as well, but staff are certainly here to answer any questions and hear any comments that may come up through members of the public in attendance in the meeting.
Thank you very much, Director. Are there any questions? Councillor Sadhu?
Thanks, and through the mayor to Director Martin. I understand you said other developments of this magnitude have had lower parking. Can you hear me? Yeah. Less parking spots. My concern was parking here. With the other developments that have the less of 1.2 or 1.5 parking spots per unit, have we had any issues with parking in general, of people parking on the street in and around that area? Just kind of want to get an idea of that first.
Thank you for the question through Mayor Salonen. The most comparable, I guess, recent application would be at the corner of Brubaker Street and Snyder's Road. That apartment building at the corner has a parking ratio of 1.2 parking spaces per unit. We have other developments that have occurred in New Hamburg as well. Looking at it, when we see parking, we often see it's about what's closest to the front door. So I think sometimes people appreciate easy access, and we see parking on the street even though there's ample or empty parking in the assigned parking spaces for a facility. Staff haven't directly received any complaints or comments in the development services department about parking rather. We have had inquiries from the developers about providing other options. So I think sometimes that comes down to multiple vehicle ownership or accessory trailers and that sort of thing. And I guess the answer to that would be the nice part about both either rental or condo ownership is through that process there's the opportunity for, in case of rental, for the property owner to dictate the number of vehicles potential tenants have, so they can basically hone that to the number of parking spaces available. And similarly through a condo application, through the condominium declaration, there's opportunity to limit vehicle use. So essentially the property owner has the opportunity to control the number of vehicles that people living in that property would utilize. What we're hearing though through review of the traffic impact study and associated parking analysis is that in this form of housing, not as many people are having two vehicles, right? Some have no vehicles, sometimes have one. So it seems to be a parking ratio that works. It provides an opportunity for higher number of units that reduces the reliance on greenfield development to support new housing. And essentially it's in an area where close at hand transit will hopefully, as that system grows, reduce the reliance on automobiles as well. So the short answer to your question is we recognize that sometimes parking is an issue. We're seeing it less of an issue in multiple developments as opposed to singles, semis, street fronting towns in some older neighborhoods where we do see that parking issue. But in this type of development, it seems to be a ratio that is working. But we're certainly here to listen to comments and concerns to help formulate an opinion going forward.
Councillor Stu for a follow-up.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up. Forgive me about looking at the map of it here. Are there any visitor parking spots? Is there a set standard as far as our bylaws or anything of development of this magnitude or clusters, there would be a set number of visitor parking spots available to any visitors?
Through your Mayor Solomon, so the parking ratio builds in both ownership and visitor parking. So there isn't a separate criteria for either. So when we talk about a parking standard, that's deemed to be the needs for that site. Certainly reliance on municipal streets for visitor parking is something we see across the board, not just in this sort of development in neighborhoods with single detached dwellings, right? There are municipal streets in proximity that could support additional vehicles for visitor parking if necessary. We don't have a specific ratio for ownership tenant parking versus visitor parking.
Go to Councillor Wilkinson and then Councillor Cressman.
Thank you. Through the chair, I too share concerns regarding the number of parking spots and the ratio that's being proposed. I think when we're looking at the number of units and if we're being realistic about what the price of these units will likely be, I anticipate it will likely require dual income in order to purchase these units, and therefore I anticipate, given the lack of available opportunities out here, there is very much a likelihood that these units would probably need to commute into town, as in Kitchener and Waterloo. So I would anticipate a need for probably 2 parking spots per unit. Maybe slightly under. I mean, we could maybe look at that ratio. That would be my first thought, just simply because this is really, it's kind of in the middle back part of Baden where there's not a lot happening, and I just don't see a lot of available opportunities job-wise for potential ownership here. So I would look at the parking and suggest that we definitely need to look at raising that ratio. I mean, I'd love to see something, maybe even a compromise here of like 1.75 if that's achievable, because what I would anticipate is if it remains at 1.2, we're probably going to see a lot of on-street parking on Beck. You may see it on Charles as well, and in and around the surrounding area, and I don't want to see that happen. So that's sort of my first thought right away. I don't even know if we could think outside of the box and potentially even look at widening Beck Street at the developer's expense to essentially provide parking there that might be reserved in a way. So that would be my initial feedback at looking at this. I don't necessarily have, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of 3 stories back there, but I understand what the developer's trying to achieve. I think the unit counts are reasonable, but I have major concerns about 1.2 spots per unit. That would be my feedback at this point.
Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor, I did look this on Google Maps, and I just wanted to orient myself. How far away is the railroad to Beck Street? Is it border on the railroad, or?
So there is a separate industrial property. It was Pastel previously operated there. So between there and the railway tracks, there's a separate industrial property.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time for Director Martin? Okay. We do have Pierre Chauvin, who is here to speak on behalf of the applicant. Thank you very much, Pierre, for joining us this evening, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Solomon, members of council, staff, members of the public. My name is Pierre Chauvin with MHBC Planning. Here on behalf of the applicant, and Matt Schnurr is here in the audience with me, who's president of Schnurr Home Builders, Inc., who's the owner of the property at 67 Beck Street. Next slide, please. Just kind of go over some of the quick context. I think this site isn't it's identified in red in the center of that 5-minute walking circle in yellow, just almost immediately south of where we're sitting this evening. Property is just under 2 acres in size. It's a former industrial site, so this is really considered kind of an industrial or a brownfield redevelopment. It has gone through a record of site condition, which has been approved by issued by the province. It's adjacent to the Baden core, which is identified in purple there on this map. It does have dual frontages on both Beck and Charles, Charles being the smaller frontage. It is in an area of what I would call transition, surrounded by residential, future residential, some employment, commercial, institutional uses. The Baden Pond and some parks and open spaces are close proximity. So this is a fairly large, relatively speaking, vacant parcel within your core area. And it's also identified as your strategic, part of your proposed strategic growth area in the south, in the, just to the south of that is the SGA as identified in your official plan, or new official plan. Next slide, please. These are just a series of photos that we've taken of the site, just starting from the top left, working our way across and then to the bottom. So Beck Street looking west, so that's really the terminus of Beck Street. As you've heard, we'll be improving Beck Street. There will be a temporary turning circle that will be required to build. In the fullness of time, if Beck Street ever extends and connects, that turning circle will be removed and restored. And in fact, it will add more parking on our site by doing so. In the middle top is the existing dwelling, looking easterly along the property line. So they're side facing, some are rear lots onto the property. The corner right is the immediately adjacent property, almost 2.5-story building, single detached, I think it's a semi-detached building, immediately abutting the property. And then below is Beck Street again, looking towards Mill Street. You can see it's a very rough-shaped road for rural cross-section. We'll need some improvement. We will be required to improve the frontage of Beck Street along our frontage, provide sidewalks, etc. You can see them then, the bottom two pictures are really the pictures of the site, looking again directly towards, looking from Beck Street, and then again more towards, in the middle of the site, the bottom corner, at the old Baden feed mill plant, looking south to Charles Street. So those are just some context pictures of the site. The next slide, we have a proposal or a concept plan, which, as Mr. Martin noted, it consists of 66 townhouse units. There's 48 stacked back-to-back towns proposed. Those are fronting onto Beck Street. And then 18 stacked townhouse units that are in a 2-story form that have access or next to the emergency access off of Charles. So the main principal access will be off of Beck Street, with the Charles Street access acting more as a emergency access. There is a density of approximately 90 units per hectare. Currently with this configuration, because of the temporary turning circle, there's 79 parking spaces for the 66 towns, which, as Mr. Martin noted, it's a ratio of 1.2. But when Beck Street does extend, we'll be able to provide a couple more spaces in that turning circle area, and that'll increase the parking to 81 spaces. There is a road widening, as Mr. Martin noted, off of Charles Street as well, so that does affect sort of the landscape area on the property. But again, with the full extension of Beck Street, that will come back to about 30% of the property will be landscaped. Next slide, please. The lands are currently in purple. You can see on the left-hand side in your official plan as industrial, and that's what we're amending, is the official plan to an urban residential designation. As Mr. Martin noted in your draft official plan, it is proposed to be designated mixed use, and the proposed use is permitted in your official plan. And as he's noted, it's a question of whether if that comes into effect before this comes back, then perhaps the official plan may not be necessary. But we are still continuing with this application, and certainly looking forward to work with staff through this process. Similarly with the zoning, we are rezoning industrial. A small portion of the sliver of land that was purchased by the township was zoned Z3 or R3, but most of it is industrial or Z10, and we propose to rezone it to a zoning category Z4, or otherwise known as residential 4. And you can see all the lands immediately to, I'll call it on this image on the right-hand side, it's all in yellow, is all residential 2A. So it is a mixed bag of zones in this area, and like I said earlier, it's an area of transition that we would hope to see that as part of the urban core and closer strategic growth area, that it'll change and evolve over time with more intense uses. Next slide, please. So as part of your new official plan, you will be incorporating the regional official plan, but obviously right now that plan is still in effect, and they're within your built-up area, which is that darker brown area, and it is within the township urban area. It's not designated as a regional employment area, so that's why we are able to designate this to a different use. And within the region's plan, the township urban area is the focus of growth, and with a number of goals and objectives of providing diverse range of housing options, being fully serviced on municipal services, providing high quality urban form, and having access to a number of transportation options. So really this is about proposing some intensification, promoting sort of a complete community, all within sort of a 15-minute walking neighborhood. There are land use compatibility policies that, without getting into details with respect to the railway, the adjacent industrial, we have done noise studies, we have implemented or proposed to implement noise mitigation measures through the design of the site, and those matters have been addressed. Next slide. Similarly, within your official plan, you're within the urban area, Baden urban area, designated industrial, within your urban growth center overlay. So again, that overlay was meant to identify this area for intensification to help achieve at this current time a 45% reurbanization target. So it's anticipated that you would want higher densities in this particular area. And the residential designation, the urban residential designation we are seeking is just providing for a mix and range of housing, and it promotes, the policies promote that kind of housing, and efficiently utilizing our land, our available service land within these types of areas. And similarly, there are criteria with respect to compatibility, and again, we believe we've addressed those matters. Last slide on the policy. I know it's really high level. But again, this is your draft official plan, and just quickly, the orange reflects the mixed-use designation, and basically that designation does permit residential uses. And again, there are certain design guidelines that we will have to adhere to, and we'll definitely be addressing through the site plan approval process. Next slide. We are amending the bylaw, and there are a few areas that do require some tweaks to the regulations. You see on the sort of middle column, the requirements under the Z4 bylaw, and the proposed column under the complete right-hand side, there are rows identified in red. Those are the ones that we are requiring amendments to. So there's a front yard setback from 7.6, which is in this case Beck Street, so we're reducing that and pushing the building mass slightly closer to the street, to 6.8. The rear yard setback, technically Charles Street is a rear yard, but those units will be oriented so they are acting like a side yard and sort of an external side yard to Charles Street. So we are requesting an amendment to that provision from 7.5 to 2.91. And as you've discussed this evening, the parking reduction that we're seeking here. Next slide. So we've done a number of studies. Obviously, we've done our planning justification report, which went through all that policy framework. I went through this with you, but we prepared a planning servicing report, which confirms that these lands are serviceable. There are some sewers that need to be monitored because of existing surcharging, but with the extension of the Snyder's Trunk sewer, we hope that surcharging will go away. But there will be requirements to monitor those sewers through the development and life of this project, or at least prior to the development of the project. As Mr. Martin noted, we have done a traffic impact study and a parking study. For this type of development, our consultants have recommended that the parking demand for this type of development, particularly the number of units or size of the units in terms of 1 versus 3 bedroom units, it demands about 0.9 to 1.26 spaces per unit. So those are their conclusions. But they've also recommended transportation demand management measures. So that could include indoor bicycle storage, unitized parking, So that means you have to pay for your parking if you intend to live in this place. And Mr. Martin alluded to whether it's rental or condo. I just want to confirm the intention at this point is to be condo. These will be at a price point between $450 and $550, so very, very, in this day and age, very affordable. And given that price point and the size of the units, some will be one bedroom, some will be three. Those one bedroom units typically require less parking than those larger units. So that's why we're asking for this reduced parking. The noise and vibration analysis was completed, and there will be requirements for noise warning clauses, special architectural details with respect to the railway. So brick and veneer masonry, some additional glazing on the windows, and some foundation improvements to reduce the vibration. So those will all be implemented either through the condo or through site plan, as well as through agreements, purchase and sale with the owners in terms of warning clauses. And lastly, the archaeology study was done, and there were no concerns from that perspective. So last slide is, and I'll just conclude on this, and essentially from a planning perspective, we believe that it is consistent with the PPS, the local policy framework. It really is a brownfield intensification development close to your core, close to your proposed SGA. It is really represents an intensification of a sort of a vacant, underutilized parcel, and contributes to the overall range of housing in your community at a very nice price point. So we certainly believe that, based on the input that we received from our consultants, that the parking space ratio is adequate, and we've also implemented, like I said, a number of mitigation measures to deal with some of the noise matters. And I note the comments from the adjacent property owner, the former Beck Seed Company, had provided comments, and yes, we have addressed those through our noise study. So I think with that, I'll conclude my comments, and I'm sure there'll be questions that hopefully I can answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pierre. Councillors, questions at this time? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Mr. Chauvin, I like the plan. I'll make a few more comments a bit later when we're speaking as council, but I think it's a good plan. I wonder if you, I'm sure that you have made your plans based on your reading of the public and what people are interested in. I wonder if you can say anything about that in terms of what people are looking for in housing. It seems to me, as you say, the price point, and if it's condos, it provides a level in the market that I think is needed, and I'm just curious if you can say anything about that in terms of what you're reading of the market.
Well, my client may kick me, but right now the word condo is a bit of a swear word. It doesn't. They're not really moving that well, but
and it is. My son has a condo downtown Toronto. They're trying to sell it. Yeah. It's. I agree with that, but
it's certainly changing, and we see that the market is picking up. Particularly with the HST rebate, perhaps even if there are DC reductions, those types of things, but. The interest rates, as long as they remain, I think that the demand is still there, and the demand is for all forms of housing, one bedroom, 2, 3 bedrooms, and I think my client is a real estate agent as well, so he knows where he's hoping to target. We're still playing around with the number of bedrooms, but it's really this is really the starter home for a lot of people, and it may be a new form of housing that you're not familiar with or as familiar with in Wilmot, but this is quite popular in Kitchener and Waterloo, and that's, I think people are probably, as you're finding, migrating out of those communities and coming to a small, more rural space, or closer to their family, or wanting to downsize, or just wanting to have less space. These won't have elevators. So yes, I know that near and dear to the mayor's heart is accessibility, and I think they won't be that, but they will be catering to that market of that first-time buyer type of market. So.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, through the chair. Mr. Chairman, I understand what you're saying, but I think you just proved exactly what I was trying to stress was when we're talking about the types of units you're building, they're supposed to be geared towards first-time home buyers. And again, the folks that are trying to enter the market probably need 2 incomes to buy these and enter the market. So you probably have 2 vehicles per unit on average. So my suggestion again would be to go away, find a way to potentially lower the density and add more parking. That would almost definitely be my preference. And you know, looking at this as a new type of housing that would be coming out here for sure. But again, I think it needs to conform with what this community has already before we start changing things drastically. So I would definitely be looking for increased parking. And if they are truly geared towards starters, then I can almost guarantee that we're going to have an overflow of parking on Beck Street, Charles Street, Mill Street, just simply because the folks that will be able to afford these or that they're geared towards will need that dual income. So that's all I'll say. I just would like to see that revised, or at least some better thought put into that.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, I just want to clarify, I did say starter, but there will be also, I would expect there are people downsizing and wanting less, so it's not necessarily geared towards starters, so I don't want you to go away thinking this is a starter home market, because there's a variety of people that may be interested in this size of house. So.
Any other questions or comments at this time, Council? I do have a few, and you already touched on a few of them and answered them as well. Really happy, though, that you guys have taken back Turtle Mountain Seeds' comments about where they're planning on going with their business. I was curious, though, especially through the updates to the official plan. Of course, council still needs to approve it, but that particular area is actually where we're contemplating up to 6-story apartment buildings. So I'm curious from an intensification perspective and actually where it's suitable. That's one that has currently been identified, again, waiting approval. I'm wondering why you chose to go with stacked towns and not look at possibly an apartment with some green space as an option there.
That's a good question, Madam Mayor. Before we started this application, well before your official plan even was conceived of, so we've started a long time ago, and that was the form of housing that we chose at the time. And yeah, I can't say why certainly we can look at it and take it back and think about a different form, but that would require a whole change to the bylaw that we're asking for in terms of building height, and probably have a totally different discussion in this council room in terms of impacts of the compatibility of that and whatnot. But we'll take that into consideration, so thank you.
And part of the reason I also raise it, I mean, now I know that site looks pretty empty, but I remember when it was the feed mills up there, so it's not that we haven't seen that height in that area before, and actually taller than what our OP is currently contemplating approving. Again, up to council's discretion, but at this time, that is something that's being considered. So I would certainly say that's something perhaps worth looking at. And certainly with that, I'd love to see more green space worked in. I know that you guys have landscaping, and of course you're trying to optimize both parking needs and getting enough units in there to make it worthwhile for yourselves. But certainly access to green space, I think, is really important, because often that is why people come out to the community, is to have maybe not a huge lot, but to have some very easily accessible space. The other thing, I'm just looking at what council's already mentioned. Waste management was the other one I was wondering. I notice in your draft design you do have 2 deep waste receptacles. Is the plan that they won't be receiving Region of Waterloo waste management collection services?
Through you, typically on a private site like this, it's usually dealt through a private contractor, so it's independent of what the region does. So, and so a private contractor would come into the site, pick up the garbage, and then take it to the landfill. So.
So one of the chief complaints that I get from the very few sites in the township that function like that is that those residents still have to pay full regional taxes because we don't give a rebate if you don't actually get waste collection services from the region. And of course, as everybody who pays regional taxes know, they continue to go up, and waste management is a big reason for that. So I would love, when you guys are going back and considering if there is even just a discussion that can happen possibly with the region of having their services come in, because generally people don't consider it when they're buying houses and go, yep, my waste is taken away. But once they start paying property taxes, come knocking on council's door asking, well, why am I paying these taxes and not getting that service? So that would just be something I would advise to take under consideration as well. And then I don't need an answer tonight, but I would just be curious also in your contemplation what this property could look like if you met the current parking requirements and yard zoning requirements.
Great question. I have done the numbers, and we would lose 12 units. It'd have to be 54 units in order to get, not even, sorry, right now your current parking requirement I believe is 2.5 spaces or 2. To get to 1.5. We'd have to lose 12 units. So that's 12 units that we wouldn't have available to the market. And like I said earlier, like contrary to what we think with this water issue, there's still a housing crisis going on. So yeah, so it is pretty significant in terms of the impact of, that's just to get to 1.5 spaces. I haven't done the numbers to get to the requirement, but it'll be probably another 10 to 12 units lost.
Okay, those were all of my questions. Were there any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I would say thank you very much again for coming tonight. And I know we're not doing any approvals, so we look forward to further conversations, but really excited to see something done with this site as it's been empty for quite a while. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Again, this is an official meeting under the under the provisions of the Planning Act. So are there any persons present who would like to speak in support of this application tonight? Okay, are there any online? No. And are there any persons present who would like to speak in opposition to this application this evening? Yes, please come forward, and if you could state your name, and then you have the floor.
So my name is Ross Good. And so I am not totally against this application. I'm not totally against this plan. I guess I would, and I don't want to belabor the point either. On behalf of Oasis Mennonite Church at 66 Mill Street, which is formerly St. James Lutheran, we still share the building, by the way. My concern is parking. I'm plain and simple. And just simply, we depend on the good graces of the Country Depot, which used to be Baden Feed and Supply. We depend on their good graces for parking, and as well on the good graces of the township in the Wilmot Seniors Woodworking Club area. And so that is simply my concern is 1.2 parking spaces, enough. I know how tight things get around there when we have services. And so I can imagine that it won't get any better. I understand what the developer is trying to do. Again, I'm not against this. I get hung up on the parking. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ross, for sharing that. If you can also share your information with the Deputy Clerk, and I think Councillor Wilkinson would like to make a comment to you.
Through the chair to Ross. If you could, I'm just curious, and I appreciate your comments. I think I would share the idea that I'm not opposed to redeveloping the site and seeing something positive happen there. But I'm curious, when you bring up the parking and you say that you have to rely on the good graces of your neighbors and the township and the overflow areas for parking, roughly how many would you see, just in terms of, I guess, members or attendees to your congregation, how many would you see on a typical service?
So on a normal service, we would have 85, 90 people there.
And through the chair, would you suggest that a lot of those 85 to 90 would carpool and some might even walk in as well from surrounding areas?
So definitely lots of carpooling.
Yeah.
Those would include families of 4, 6, 8 in total. So
Okay.
yeah, and then lots of people vehicles that would show up with 2 people in it.
Thank you for the information. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just anecdotally add, I know when church is in service on Sunday if you're walking down those streets because they are quite full. Thank you very much, Ross. Is there anyone else present that would like to speak on this application? Seeing none, is there anybody online? Okay. This meeting is now closed. And council, the recommendation today is just to receive this report for the application and zone change application for 67 Beck Street for information. So I would look for a mover for that. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? Oh, yes, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, is there opportunity for discussion yet, or you were thinking we should just...
Sorry, no, I am happy for discussion. I forgot to ask, frankly, so please go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. I could have made more comments when Mr. Chauvin was up, but I said I would make comments at later. And I realize as we get closer to the election, we may be wanting to make some posturing in terms of those of us that are running in the next election. What I would ask for the rest of my council members is to consider the election. I remember in 2022, some business owners saying to me, what can you do to improve housing in Wilmot Township? So it seems to me that an application like this is a way of improving housing in Wilmot Township. And so, yes, parking is an issue, but I think it's resolvable. I would not be opposed to the number of units proposed in this plan. This was brought forward for information. We're not voting on it, but I'm just putting forward, I guess, an ask or a recommendation to consider the election, because I think in the polls we have people that are looking for more housing. And it seems to me that this kind of a plan is something that people are looking for.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'd maybe just suggest we should always be considering what various opinions across our electorate are looking for us to represent. But thank you very much for those points. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, if I may. Councillor Martin, I certainly appreciate your comments and thoughts. I'll say this and leave it here. When we're within this chamber, I am here to represent the public of Wilmot Township, and specifically my focus at this moment is to represent Ward 2, so I have that in mind, and then additionally the folks that live here and pay taxes here. I respect that there is ongoing debate within the public, and it will be settled during an election. However, at the end of the day, I think my record here speaks for itself, and always asking and rather consistent on ensuring that we at least have an appropriate mix of housing within our township. We are in a housing crisis, absolutely, but that doesn't necessarily dictate to this community that we have to address it through every application that comes through. So I've always been consistent on this. I would like to see reduced density that is more fitting with our neighborhood and style out here. And I respect your opinion that you might respectfully disagree with that, but that would be my take on it. So appreciate it.
Any other comments? Councillor Sadhu.
Just in general, no one's going to disagree that there's not a housing crisis and we do need more mixed housing. I would just say that's not an excuse to abandon our minimum requirements for parking, green space, etc. This is going to be a place where people live. This is a rural area, not an urban city. So maybe we're not going to be able to have large single detached or estate homes, but ultimately people moving into these units, they want to be able to go outside and barbecue. So just having enough space for that or minimum standards, I agree that there is a housing crisis, but we can't just simply abandon all that and just say let's just stuff as many units and homes in areas as much as possible. And to the parking, yes, ultimately we've seen there every driveway you go and see in your subdivisions has 2 cars, sometimes 3. So living in a rural area, we ultimately are more reliant on vehicles. I'm sure in the future with further transit and more opportunities that people can kind of scale back on that. But in this time right now, in the foreseeable future, vehicles are the go-to transit mode for a lot of the home buyers that are coming out here. So we need to make sure we are planning for that and having enough infrastructure for them to park for the new folks coming and for the existing residents that are living in and around there.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on this item?
And I have a car for you.
Okay. With that, again, I will remind everyone that this public meeting is technically closed, but we're currently just voting to receive this for information. And I would say Mr. Chauvin certainly was taking notes, I noticed, so I believe we'll absolutely be taking back this feedback to his client, who I know is also in the audience. And I think that we have lots that we will be discussing when the official plan comes back, because I think a lot of what was shared are going to be principles that we'll be addressing in the official plan review. With that, I do already have a mover and a seconder, so I will call the vote for receiving for information. All those in favor, all those opposed, and that is carried. On to our last public meeting for this evening, and again, this is an official public meeting under the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of this meeting is to consider zone change application 05-26 for Gingrich Road in Baden, and this is report DS-2026-12, and I will call on Director Martin again to provide an overview of this application.
Thank you, Mayor Sullivan. The application before you proposes to change the zoning for a property on Gingrich Road, north side of Gingrich Road, lands owned by the Schmidt estate. These lands are currently designated in the Township official plan for industrial use. This is the next step in implementing that official plan by proposing an amendment to the zoning bylaw. A number of things have occurred around that site recently, with the twinning of the culvert under Gingrich Road, which allowed modifications to the artificial floodplain in that area, the construction of the Baden trunk sewer as well. Ultimately, land has been dedicated to the township that surrounds that property for future trail uses as buffers to environmental features, and ultimately for the land in which the Baden trunk sewer has been installed. The zoning application before you would recognize industrial uses, but also limit the potential for incompatibility between existing residential development and potential residential development to the north. So the zoning would not be for heavy industry. It would limit uses based on land use compatibility. Outside of that, the details of what may be constructed on that, the ultimate servicing of the site, all of those components would happen through a separate process, whether it's one landowner or if they propose to divide ownership. Site plan approval, severance applications, there's a number of planning tools that would be engaged in actually developing the site in the future. This essentially puts the zoning in place to allow for the potential sale of the property to an end user that may want to develop the site. I'll leave my comments at that. Certainly here to answer any questions that may come up.
Thank you very much, Director. Are there questions? Okay, seeing none at the moment. We do have a delegation coming up this evening. I will invite Michael, Sarah, and Heather Price to the podium to present. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, through the mayor to the council and members of the public in person and online. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Michael Sarah, and I'm here on behalf of GSP Group representing the estate of Enid Schmidt. Tonight I'll be walking you through the zoning bylaw amendment application for 2 parcels of land located on the north side of Gingrich Street, west of Foundry and within the Baden community. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this presentation is to introduce this application, provide a quick overview of the planning framework and the proposed zone changes, and to hear comments from the public agencies as part of the statutory progress. Next slide, please. So the application applies to 2 parcels totaling approximately 14.1 hectares of land. For the purpose of this presentation, We'll refer to them as parcels A and B. As you'll note, parcel A on the left is part of lot 16th, south of Snyder's Road, which is approximately 7.5 hectares, and parcel B, which is part of lot 15 on the south side of Snyder's Road, which is approximately 6.5 hectares. These parcels are separated by a township-owned right-of-way intended for future trail connection. And the lands are currently vacant agricultural fields, no longer active farming uses, and they abut Baden Creek along the north and northeast edges. Next slide, please. To summarize the surrounding context, to the north is vacant estate-owned lands planned for future subdivision. To the east is existing residential neighborhoods beyond Foundry Street. To the south is a mix of commercial and industrial uses. And to the west is predominantly agricultural fields within the Wilmot Recreation Complex further west. This context supports the transition of the site to the industrial employment use. Next slide, please. As Director Martin had previously noted, a key component enabling this development is the Baden Sanitary Trunk Sewer realignment, which has now been constructed on a portion of the land located to the east. As you'll note, the previous flood line was that yellow line, and the reconstructed new flood line is that light blue line on the image to the right. The sewer alignment runs along the northerly and northeasterly edges of the site. The lands associated with the sewer relocation are being transferred to the township, and the new sewer provides service stubs for both industrial parcels. Next slide, please. In the regional official plan, the site is designated in the township urban area on map 1, a designated greenfield area on map 2, and employment area on map 3. These designations direct employment growth to this location and support industrial development on the land. In the Township of Wilmot official plan, the current township official plan, the site is designated for general industrial on the Baden urban area map in 4.1, designated greenfield area map in map 2.2, and urban and rural settlement area as per map 10. The township's official plan identifies Baden as a primary focus for future employment growth, and industrial uses are permitted within the general industrial designation. Next slide, please. The site is currently zoned Z1 agricultural, as you'll note in the image on the screen now. And next slide, please. The application proposes to rezone the lands to Z10 industrial and a portion of it to Z11 open space for those floodplain and natural heritage buffers, aligning with the township's official plan as it's designated for industrial use. The zoning implements the OP and reflects the environmental constraints identified in the supporting studies as well. The zoning bylaw amendment proposes the rezoning from Z1 agricultural to Z10 industrial to allow for future industrial subdivision development and consistent with the policies within the official plan. Rezoning environmentally constrained areas to the Z11 open space include those floodplain areas, watercourse buffers, and natural heritage areas. No buildings or structures are permitted in the Z11 zone, and no development is proposed at this time. There is a site-specific provision that will be introduced for the industrial zone as well. This provision ensures compatibility with the existing and future sensitive land uses, particularly to the north and to the east, and require compliance with provincial D6 and NPC noise land use compatibility criteria as per the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and prohibits specific high-impact industrial uses on the land. These measures will ensure that a future development is compatible with the surrounding residential areas. Next slide, please. A full suite of studies and reports were completed to support the application, including a functional servicing and stormwater management report, a geotechnical report, a stage 3 archaeological assessment, an environmental impact study, a hydrogeological assessment with continued groundwater monitoring as well. Together, these studies demonstrate that the site is environmentally, technically, and functionally suitable for the industrial rezoning. Next slide, please. Thank you for listening to this presentation. Tonight's meeting is part of the statutory process. The estate and GSP are committed to providing responses to the public and agency comments and working collaboratively with the township and regional staff. To conclude, the zoning bylaw amendment aligns the site zoning with the regional and township official plans. It enables future industrial development, contributing to Wilmot's employment land supply. It incorporates environmental protection, servicing feasibility, and land use compatibility measures. And it represents good planning and supports long-term economic growth in Baden. We look forward to continuing to work with the township and the community as this application moves forward. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I do have some business cards on me as well that I can provide to anybody, members of council or the public that do have questions that they'd like to ask if they wouldn't like to ask at this meeting. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Michael. Are there questions at this time, Council? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm curious, I guess first and foremost a comment just to provide some context. I like the positioning of this, given that it's kind of right at the entryway to town. We already have some industrial uses that are ongoing there. I guess I'm just curious what's motivating your client at the moment, because I look at area that's not too far west from this location that we have been struggling to find industrial tenants for. So I'm just curious if your client anticipates any changes, or if they know something we don't, but just sort of trying to understand the motivation from that perspective.
Through the mayor to the council, no, that's a very fair question. As sort of mentioned, this is more so, I guess, a conformity exercise to ensure that if there were any changes to economic landscape, that these lands are primed and prepared for that sort of industrial development to increase economic demands, and just ensure that we're conforming to both the official plan and that the zoning is pulled in to ensure that everything is ready to go if things were to change, or our tenant would like to come and purchase the lands for future industrial use. Oh, sorry.
Any other questions, Council? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much, Michael, for coming this evening. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilkinson does still have another.
No problem.
Pardon me, through the chair, I would have a comment to add. With what you envision for this property, I know, and looking at it and knowing what some of the surrounding businesses there are, just a brief point to consider, and I realize, I believe this portion of Gingook Road is actually township governed, but I think the town, for the most part, would be appreciative if there was an inclusion of sidewalks, either on your side or not, because there's a rather popular coffee shop over there. And if we're looking at increasing industrial uses in this area, it would at least be nice to have a safe way of traveling via foot, or whether that be other active transportation. So I would leave that comment with you and your client. Thank you.
Did you want to respond to that, Michael?
Sure. I'll just say through mayor to the council, I appreciate that comment. If this application were to proceed through to the site plan stage eventually, whether that's through ourselves and our client, or whether that's through future respective developers, we'll be sure to consider that for sure. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And Director Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Sullivan. Just to add to that, through pre-submission application, we did highlight that through the development of that site, the continuation of the multi-use trail that exists on the east side of Foundry Street, we would look for a similar treatment along this stretch of the road as well. So that would come at a future stage of development. But your comments are noted, but we have noted those as well. So.
Very good. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Michael. Again, this is a public meeting under the Planning Act. So are there any persons present who would like to speak in support of the zone change application this evening? Seeing none, are there any online? Okay. Are there any persons present who would like to speak in opposition to the application this evening? Seeing none, are there any online? And for a third and final time, is there anybody who would like to speak to this application? Okay, then I declare this public meeting now officially closed. Council, we do have a recommendation, and again, tonight it would just be to receive this for information, no decision actually being made. I would look for a mover, please. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. Any other comments or questions on this? Councillor Martin?
Through Mayor Sallin, last week there was a meeting through the Board of Trade for trades and manufacturing people to get together, and this kind of a site, don't know if it interests people that were there, but the comment was made that we need more land for this kind of usage. So I think it's good, and I think it's important that we do this.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. We do still have a lengthy agenda before us, but I was wondering if we wanted to take a quick 10-minute recess. I'd be looking for a mover for that. Moved by Councillor Stu, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. We will be back at 8:48, or I guess 8. A seconder to reconvene in open session. Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. So I just wanted to update everyone because, again, we still have a long agenda. We're going to have our staff presentation on When in Wilmot campaign, and then I would be looking to council to see if we could entertain moving up Report 12.2, which is the draft plan of subdivision and zone change application for Activa Holdings in Baden, and also move up Report 12.4, which is the Petersburg Drinking Water System Local Improvement Act charges. I would be looking for that because many of the folks in the audience are here for those items in particular. Not to say that you don't want to stick around for the whole meeting, but I also appreciate that you've sat through a lot of planning items already, so wanting to just be cognizant of your time as well. So do I have anyone in council that's opposed to that plan? Okay. And staff, I mean, you're stuck here the whole time, so hopefully that is okay on your end. So with that, we will go into our presentation for this evening, 8.2, and this is the One in Wilmot campaign. So I will invite up our community services staff, led by Manny, to present this. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. Tonight we're bringing a collaborative project from the Community Services Department where Castle Kilbride and Recreation Programming staff have joined forces to create a project that is as unique to Wilmot as Nithie is. Joining me here tonight is Sherry Grupp, Curator of Castle Kilbride, Taylor Haynes, Museum Assistant, and Lacey Smith, the Supervisor of Recreation Programming.
As directed by the Community Services Master Plan, this project is to promote visitation and tourism in Wilmot Township. The Quarter 2 goal states to develop day trips in Wilmot to sites such as Castle Kilbride, New Hamburg Water Wheel, and the Mike Scout Wetlands. Through a brainstorming session between Castle Kilbride and Recreation Programming staff, the concept of a social media campaign where the community follows along with our beloved Nithie, the Nith River Monster, as he travels around local day trip destinations right here in our own backyard.
So showcasing 3 of Wilmot's most prized local locations, we follow Nithie around to learn and explore. This promotional highlights the community as a day trip destination with stops at the New Hamburg Water Wheel, the Mike Scouts Wetland Preserves, and Castle Kilbride.
Why Nithie? This family-friendly and beloved character offers something for everyone, from those reminiscing on when they first met Nithie to those being introduced to him for the first time. The myth of the Nith begins in July 1953 when strange footprints and clawed tracks appeared along the Nith River in New Hamburg, sparking theories of giant lizards, turtles, or escaped alligators. Local Constable George Thomas even claimed to glimpse a 2 to 3 foot, 50-pound creature one night, though he failed to catch it. Word spread fast and it gained national attention. Journalists, alligator wrestlers, and zoologists descended on Wilmot to investigate, but found nothing conclusive. The mystery evolved into a lasting legend known as Nithie. Nithie has appeared over the years at Monsterfest and was revived in the 1990s for Oktoberfest and numerous other parades and events since. Nithie remains part of Wilmot's folklore and heritage celebrations, the perfect cultural icon.
We'd now like to take a moment to reintroduce you to Nithie, as well as one of these selected locations, with an official video of When in Wilmot for the Mike Scouts Wetlands. We hope you enjoy.
Today, Nithie is feeling right at home on a visit to his natural habitat, the Mike Scout Wetlands Preserve. This project is relatively new to Wilmot, as it began in 2019 when Mike Scout approached the township about utilizing underdeveloped floodplain land. The land was given to the township to create a preserve that would benefit wildlife and the environment, be a place for learning, and a spot promoting health and well-being within the community that all could enjoy for years to come. And so on June 10th, 2023, the Mike Scout Wetlands Preserve opened. When you come to the Mike Scout wetlands, there's so much more than just the potential of a nithy spotting, as he partakes in a leisurely stroll through the 1.6 kilometer long raised boardwalk that spans multiple wetland ponds to look forward to. Do you have a soft spot for pollinators, or is there an avid bird watcher in your midst? Then the over 20 acres of pollinator meadows at the Mike Scout wetlands, home to bees, along with countless varieties of birds and insect species, might be just the place for you. The wetlands are also home to heron, eagle, and osprey nests with poles and installation donated by Innova Power Corporation. Or maybe you're just an overall nature lover who can't help but see every tree in the forest. Well, here at the wetlands, 10,000 trees have been planted with the help of the Grand River Conservation Authorities, Let's Tree Wilmot, and local residents alike. If you love learning about the cute and creepy crawlies of nature, like turtles, snakes, and bats, the Mike Scout wetlands have that too. Thank you for visiting Nithhi, and let your friends know when in Wilmot, please visit the Mike Scout Wetlands Preserve.
When in Wilmot has the potential to increase tourism across the township and showcase...
Today, Nithhi is feeling right...
I get to talk over myself. That doesn't happen very often. So when in Wilmot has the potential to increase tourism across the township and showcase all of our potential local stores, shops, businesses, and farms that are Nithhi approved. We can expand Nithhi and his adventures to all aspects of the community, including reviving special event visits to local celebrations like Victoria Day, Mennonite Relief Sale, Canada Day, and the New Hamburg Fall Fair. Through our adventures with Nithhi, we can learn and explore the heights as tall as the water wheel and highlight the features that make Wilmot the perfect place to call home.
Very good. I just want to make sure that that was okay. Thank you very much for that presentation, and it's very good to see Nithhi out and about again. Really excited with the collaboration between your two teams and seeing the work that you guys are able to do with, I know, already packed work agendas and priorities, but I think this will be really great for the community. So from my perspective, thank you for bringing it forward. Council, were there any questions or comments that you had on this? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I think it's great. I hear from a reliable source Nithhi's coming to Canada Day, so that'll be one of the next activities, but I think this is great. Good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Not seeing any. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing other Nithhi-approved locations across the township. So now, as prior mentioned, we are going to jump forward into our reports, specifically 12.2 we're going to deal with next, and that is the draft plan of subdivision and zone change application for Activa Holdings in Baden. So the recommendation is that the report DS-2026-13, draft plan of subdivision 30T-22602 and zone application change 11-22 Activa Holdings Baden be received for information, and that council approves zone change application 11-22 as set out in the draft bylaws included in attachment B to report DS 2026-13, and, oh, this is a long one, that council pursuant to the section of 5131 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990 CP 13 as amended, grant approval to the draft plan of subdivision subject to the conditions included as attachment C to the report, and that the Director of Development Services or delegate be authorized to approve the draft plan and subsequent minor modifications to the draft plan and execute all necessary plans and documents required to register the subdivision plan or phase of subdivision plan. And lastly, that upon registration of the subdivision or any phases thereof, of the Director of Development Services or delegate shall provide the report to council summarizing any minor modifications made to the draft plan prior to registration of the plan. May I get a mover and a seconder to get this on the table? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Sadhu, and I will turn it over to Director Martin to present this report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. I will leave my comments fairly brief, as we did go through this in detail at the public meeting in April. Since that time, the application has seen some minor amendments. With respect to the draft plan itself, the previous submissions had identified a walkway block and drainage corridor basically along the northern boundary of the current subdivision here and the southern boundary of the development. The application's plan has been modified to remove that through some detailed engineering review. It was determined that a maintenance path was not required, and there's already a street with sidewalk network to provide the active transportation connectivity that would have otherwise been realized by a rear yard trail. Instead, a 10-meter easement is reserved instead of a 10-meter block of ownership. It would not include a trail. It would include provisions for overland drainage that exists, and the developers proposing landscaping within that area, so primarily tree planting and other similar landscaping. I believe they have a concept with some cross sections that they would be able to provide to council if that is requested. The second piece of it was dealing with the heights of proposed buildings within the multiple blocks within the development. The previous proposal identified up to 6 stories. The applicant has revised that to limit the height to 4 stories, given comments and concerns raised at the public meeting. Essentially, the number of units remains consistent with what was previously proposed. The development remains consistent in terms of road connectivity and zoning provisions. I will comment on a couple of items that were raised. One was the transportation impact study and its validity in today's date based on when information was collected, and we certainly did reach out to the traffic consultant on that, who identified that the work is still valid. They did update it with information on recent intersection counts. Some of the road network counts couldn't occur because of the Snyder's Road construction, but based on similar comparables at intersections and modeling based on growth projections, they've indicated that the numbers they provided in this report are still valid for the purpose of considering the road network. So certainly the TIS piece was addressed as previously commented by staff. With respect to road connectivity, township staff remain of the opinion that the integration of this development with the existing neighborhood and all street connections are important to the full connectivity of the neighborhoods. Traffic distribution is a key item when we talk about traffic flows, so providing multiple opportunities to move traffic from this neighborhood ultimately out to Snyder's Road. Providing multiple road connectivity options allows for that choice. If one road is busy, they can choose another, and allows for full connectivity between the neighborhoods, to provide access to the schools, to provide access between residential streets, providing safe access for emergency services, and for ongoing maintenance from infrastructure services with respect to roadworks. Should there be an incident in one road closure, provides options for other ways to get out of the neighborhood. So that connectivity is important. And staff would certainly identify that was always the intent. So prior to the homes being constructed in the current residential neighborhood, the builder did install signs at all of the road stubs, basically identifying that these are future roads. There was more time passed since those homes were constructed till this point than originally anticipated, and certainly those signs have come down over the number of years that's passed. But at the time those homes were constructed, it was very clear that those road interconnections would be there, and as part of proper and appropriate planning, staff remain of the opinion that those road connections should exist. And the last piece is the developer is actually transferring a significant amount of land to the township, both with respect to stormwater management and for ultimately protection of the woodland and wetland features to the north of the site. So that land is now included as a designation block. So that provides ownership for those environmental features and their associated buffers to ensure that that protection occurs long term, and supported by the EAS that was undertaken for the site. I will certainly be available to answer questions. I didn't touch on everything that's in the report, but I was touching on highlights of concerns and comments I've received in conversations, but if there's anything else, I'm happy to answer.
Questions for Director Martin, Council? I did have a question, and I think it would be for you opposed to the actual client. In attachment E, it had the traffic calming suggestions. Who would be responsible for installation should council want to proceed with those proposed changes?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Salmon. So the conditions of draft approval speak to those pieces, that it would be a shared cost. So there's existing traffic on those roads, so a component of calming would be related to existing traffic, and then any additional traffic introduced to the neighborhood as a result of the new development would create the need. So through the detailed design and engineering of the subdivision, the actual improvements, whether it be curb bump outs, narrow intersections, those sorts of things would be identified, and a cost sharing provision would be in place. Director Vanderwall can speak to the budget line that deals with traffic calming that would deal with a component, and the developer ultimately, we would foresee the actual construction of any traffic calming occurring with their forces through the development of the neighborhood, and then with contribution from the township related to the associated aspect of traffic calming with the existing traffic flows in that area. So I think I maybe talked around the answer, but it would be a shared cost.
Okay, I guess I understand the shared cost part, but it was in particular the Jacob Cressman and Michael Myers, because that's currently a stub. And then on the new lands proposed for development, Jacob Cressman and Street 1, and then Street 1 and the connection into the west parcel, because those don't have existing traffic, do those still fall under like a shared dealer that would solely be on the landowner?
Your second point, it would be within the new development would be the developer's responsibility.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Cressman.
Just through you, Mayor, that was certainly my question as well, looking at it. And is that, when we talk shared, is that shared equally or 60-40 or?
Through Mayor Solomon, the exact proportions haven't been determined at this point. It will largely depend on the ultimate, through the detailed design in conversations with our infrastructure services department, to determine what the ultimate solution is, what those costs would be, and looking at a reasonable percentage of traffic generated from the existing neighborhood versus the new. So that would be a fluid conversation. I don't have the exact proportions at this point because we ultimately don't know the final design and costs associated with it. But we have had a conversation with the developer, and they are more than willing to come to the table to be involved in that ultimate solution.
Okay. Any other questions for Director Martin? Seeing none at this time, we do have two specific interest allegations regarding this report today. So I will first invite back up Pierre Chauvin, who's representing this applicant as well. Pierre, you will have 7 minutes for this one. Thank you very much for sticking around to present to us again.
Mayor Solon, I won't take 7 minutes. I'll probably take 1 minute. Thank you again. Pierre Chauvin here on behalf of Activa Holdings. We're here in support of the staff recommendation. We've had an opportunity to review the report, the recommendations, and the draft approval conditions, and we agree with what's in your report. I have provided just on the screen a simple cross-section of what the rear yards will look like between the proposed development, which would be on the left, and the existing development, and we actually try to position the homes based on their photography, where they are in relation to the lots. You can see the property line, sort of that vertical line running between the two houses is the property line. And there's a 10-meter buffer, which was the proposed trail, identified from, sort of offset from that black dashed line. And so in any event, that 10-meter area will be landscaped. You can see the existing grades in dashed line at the very bottom of and then the proposed grades in a thick, solid line. So we are elevating. There's a lot of fill required for this site. We are elevating the site, and although even with that elevation, there's not much grade difference in terms of height of the houses, but that'll hopefully be screened with that landscape buffer. So this cross-section coincides with, if you look at the air photo, that AA cross-section, and I believe that's just right, more on the, I'll call it the northerly side, closer to Isaac Shantz. If you go to the next slide, please, it just so slightly moves down around that circle, and then again, see the grade difference is a little different, a little less pronounced. Again, next slide. And again, the grades are almost matching, equal. And next slide, last cross section. So this is probably the most pronounced in terms of a swale. There is some existing drainage issues that we need to address in that bottom corner, and that's why what you're seeing, that little dip in the proposed grades, is to control and direct the water, which will go into a pipe internal to our subdivision and eventually to the stormwater management pond. So it will, this design will actually be correcting an existing drainage issue here, but bottom line is that will be landscaped, and there are draft approval conditions. It won't be a trail anymore, and that was in a direct response to the comments we heard around the shoehorn here. So I think other than that, we support the staff recommendation, and we're happy to, I'm here to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I couldn't read the writing, and so I'm going to ask this. To the right is the existing subdivision in grades. To the left is the new development, which will be higher. And then you'll direct the water to one side, and it has to go back to the higher elevation, and you'll transfer it through a pipe to get back to the stormwater management ponds?
In this particular case, there is a more pronounced swale that you can see in the dip in the grades, and it's being directed kind of downward and then up into our subdivision. So not going into the existing subdivision, into the proposed subdivision. On all the others, if you can go back, that swale is less pronounced. It actually it's all just will be captured with I believe we rear our catch basins and then directed internally.
Just for clarity, the stormwater ponds are to the north, and yet the new subdivision to the north is at a higher elevation. So somehow we've got to make water run uphill. So there must be either some type of way to transfer it. So that's where I'm running into my confusion.
Yeah, I understand, and there is a certain percentage that is being directed, as far as I'm trying to recall the sort of the drainage design, but I think a certain proportion is going to the existing storm pond in the existing subdivision, but the majority is then being directed to. And there is capacity in the new existing storm pond and near the existing subdivision, but that's just a very small portion of the plan.
Any other questions? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair. Mr. Chauvin, wanted to seek clarity on blocks 15 in particular. So I've noted that the new draft plan has townhomes in brackets. However, there's a lot of stars next to it, and it's obviously still being referred to as multiple residential blocks, right? So you're looking at cluster towns, or as we've already discussed those this evening, but essentially they're like apartment style, right? So I'm just looking at the total area that you'd be able to build on. I'm wondering how you guys are anticipating getting 95 to 115 units on there. I mean, I was hopeful that we would see a reduction in height. We did. Still not as far as I'd like, but I'm trying to understand how those would look like townhomes exactly.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, we have developed a concept for a typical cluster towns. We haven't done there's multiple ways to look at the site, so we just wanted that flexibility for the additional height. So if you could have a block of a 4-story apartment, you could have stacks, you could have clusters. So that's how we arrived at sort of a higher number based on sort of the higher number is based on a density factor that we just assumed, and the lower number is actually based on a cluster townhouse development. So that 95 is actually based on an actual concept that we've come up with, whereas the higher range, we just assumed, I can't recall offhand what that was, but a 35 units per hectare type of thing, or perhaps 40 units per hectare in this case, and that's how we came up with that density.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you, through the chair. So I appreciate the explanation. My concern is that when we look at the staging of this neighborhood and how it might play out, and again, looking at the time frame, right, knowing that we need to see the development west of here proceed forward with connections, and we're still waiting for the sewer, we're still waiting for the obviously the servicing, so on and so forth. So my concern is the way that this is proposed is, does this change all of a sudden, 3 years from now, 4 years from now, when you might revisit it and look and say, we need to go back to being a 6-story multi-residential, because I would realize that this would be approved under the current official plan. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. I would prefer this be almost back to a residential block and even anticipate street towns or back-to-backs as opposed to sort of what's being proposed, just to help mitigate and lower the density, because I think that's where a lot of people's concerns are derived from, is that it's, yes, they're connecting neighborhoods, and yes, they were conceived that way 20 years ago, but we're talking about two vastly different neighborhoods now, 2 decades later.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm trying to understand the question. I think I understand, but certainly the old subdivision was built at a different time, and what we thought of density a lot differently than we do now. I don't think stacked towns were even a thing back then. I was involved in that subdivision, and the most we saw in terms of density was that multiple block of bungalow towns. Now things have changed dramatically. How things will be 10, 15 years from now, we have clients who are actually, in fact, right now, even looking at multi-sites and developing them as singles now, because that's what's selling as a small single. People aren't wanting the stacked towns. So it's an interesting market right now. Like I said earlier, condos, people don't like condos, so they're finding that smaller singles is actually what's selling. So we're being asked to change some of the old thinking. So that's completely different than what we thought. I can't predict, but the ultimate goal here is to provide a mixture and to provide not just one uniform type of housing product, but to respond to the market and have the flexibility. And that's all we're asking for here in the zoning, is to have that flexibility.
Through the chair, I appreciate the explanation, and I want to pick up on one interesting point you just mentioned, that you're seeing small single detached homes sort of take off. Traditional, wartime homes, we might have seen them in the 40s, 50s, right? I would agree. That's, in my opinion, how we solve some of this pricing issue, because that's what I think the market is demanding. It's my own personal interpretation, of course, but I know that there's data that suggests that. So I guess I'm wondering how agreeable the owner or the applicant would be in this case to look at changes to some of these blocks and maybe looking at some of those more defined, like small singles, and then maybe working with you to look at some of those towns being in that multi-residential area. I'm really looking at ways that we might be able to find an agreement to scale back the density here.
Through you, Madam Chair, if you're asking me to change the block now at this point, I'm not in a position to sort of negotiate on the fly right now. I can't recall whether the Z4, and maybe Mr. Martin can help me out, allows for singles. Maybe it doesn't. But like I said, the intention has always been to provide for a mixing of product, and we certainly, at this point, this is what we would prefer to proceed with, but I'll just leave it at that.
I will go to Director Martin just for the clarity that you were asking about.
Thank you, Mayor Sullivan. So in Zone 4 right now, the proposal is to allow for residential apartments, cluster townhomes, residential back-to-back townhomes, and residential street towns. So it's all apartment, multi-dwelling or townhome units is what the current proposal is within Zone 4, which is applicable to those Block 15, 16 areas.
What I would suggest, Madam Mayor, if I may, like if it's desirable, we could add singles and semis in accordance with the Z2 zone to allow that additional flexibility. I'm not saying that that's what product will be, but at least allows that opportunity that if the market does change, we don't have to be back here with a zone change. We could just do a modification to the plan and have singles there, smaller singles. So that would be just offering that as a compromise that you allow for singles and semis in accordance with the Z2. I look to Mr. Martin for the appropriate zoning category, but that would be an option as well.
Through the chair, quickly, just as a point of clarification, are you suggesting that for the other blocks such as 7, 8, 9, and 10?
I was only speaking to Block 15, but if
looking at is Z2A.
If you're looking at the other multi-blocks, sure, I think and that's not unusual. I can say in Kitchener they have a similar type of all-encompassing zone. I always call it. They have, I think it's now Res 4. It used to be R6. It allowed for singles all the way through to the multis, so it allowed the flexibilities for developers to respond in the market. And it was in those cases that we're seeing that some of these multi-blocks that were designed or planned for cluster towns, we're trying to redesign to make them small singles. But that zoning allowed for it. And so what I'm suggesting is something similar.
And just expectation setting, if council wants to go down that path, and for the general public, if that is what's decided tonight, it would not be guaranteeing that we'd be seeing singles. It's just allowing for the flexibility, opposed to right now what's currently was proposed to council is not allowing singles on those sites. So just want everyone to be on the same page for that. Other questions or comments, council? I did have a question, and actually kind of tying into the conversation that we just had. Are cottage courts something that you're familiar with and something that your client has ever contemplated? And I appreciate that this is on the fly. It was prompted kind of by the discussion of the smaller homes tonight. I'm just curious if that's a model that you guys have at all explored or potentially built.
Madam Mayor, are you suggesting like tiny home type of cluster developments? Is that what you're? So
it's more of a concept that I've seen in the U.S. So they're single detached homes. You own the home, but they're clustered around like a joint park, essentially, that all of those homes directly have access to. So it's not necessarily a public green space, but they share a backyard, essentially.
I am familiar with that to design. We've actually looked at with this developer in another location for that type of form of housing. At the end of the day, what we concluded, it was not as efficient in terms, there's actually a lot of wasted land, so to speak, in terms of parking, separation distances. You have code issues in terms of limited distance separation between the units. It's a nice concept, but it quite often doesn't work. Then you have to create condos, individual condos for these little pods, and small condos like that don't work. You need lots of numbers to bring those condo fees down, and so for those reasons and others, that's why we haven't explored that any further.
Fair enough. Thank you. Councillor Stu.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Pierre. Honestly, I don't envy the position you're in. You got to advocate for the developer, go against pesky councillors who want it a certain way while balancing what staff requirements are. ultimately, I'm looking for some flexibility. I know I had mentioned it in the previous meeting about the two connecting streets that would be going through the current subdivision that was built about 20-some years ago into the existing one. Ultimately, I'm still beating the drum of I would like to see both of those as emergency access points. It adds flexibility as far as it gives us the opportunity to see real-time data of how the traffic patterns are. I'm not saying no forever, but if we find that we do have issues in the future, we can revisit it. It gives flexibility to this council, future councils. I just think it's a balancing act of giving the current residents there the peace of mind of knowing they're not going to have any extra traffic, while also giving access points for emergencies, residents to walk through. Just looking at the plan in front of me here, if for a resident living on Street 5, it's going to be quite a hike to get down to the schools. I mean, if you're living on Michael Myers, for example, that's a walking distance, and we want to promote people to walk their kids to the schools instead of drive. Having seen the schools in the mornings, I know there is a lot of vehicle traffic, a lot of high density. That's one thing that I wouldn't be doing my residents any justice if I didn't try to advocate for those streets to be emergency access points where for now it's emergency access, and in the future we can kind of see the real-time data of the traffic patterns, or if we have an issue that we can kind of revisit it then.
Through Madam Mayor, I guess first of all, just want to clarify, I'm not an advocate, not a lawyer. I'm a planner, and I have to look at things just like your own planners objectively, and what makes sense, and good planning. And in Planning School 101, it's all about connectivity. Connectivity for pedestrians, connectivity for traffic, distribution of traffic. You know, the traditional grid, there's a reason why the traditional grid pattern roads is always generally the way to go, because it distributes traffic and you don't create these high volume arterial roads that are not pedestrian friendly or cyclist friendly, and just doesn't create a good sense of place. So that's what we were trying to achieve here, is that connectivity. We did discuss this at length with staff. We did discuss this with our traffic consultant. They felt the same, our traffic consultant felt the same in terms of not overloading the other subdivision, that new collector road that outlets to Snyder's Road. That will become even a bigger problem. So the desire is really to provide more connectivity, and in a fullness of time as well, the additional lands that are owned by Activa, if the barn ever goes away and the MDS issue is no longer, will need Isaac Shantz. And last thing I would say is I would kind of commend staff for their foresight in providing these connections. That not only here, but you look at the connection down at Wagler. It provides now a direct connection to the existing subdivision to the future Catholic public school that'll be there. So if it weren't for staff at the time to look at those possibilities, we wouldn't have that today. And it just makes sense to make sure that, and we don't often like it, you know, because it provides, you know, we're giving up land for a future road stub that may not get developed in 20 years, but that's what I think that it made sense at the time, and I think it still continues to make sense today. So I hear what you're saying. We believe that with the traffic calming that's proposed, and we will share, you heard that we'll share that cost, that'll help. And ideally, like you said, most people should walk anyhow to the school instead of creating these traffic problems around the public school, but we all know that just doesn't happen. So I had kids driving to school, even though I could have walked, I'm going to work. So I know it's a problem, but I think the way it's designed now, I think we support staff's position on that.
We will go to Councillor Stu again, and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. ultimately, it's a catch-22 in my mind. In one hand, we're saying, yes, better connectivity. On the other hand, we're saying, let's put speed mitigation, make it so undesirable that people don't want to go down that road. So that's the thought I have in my head of, well, if that's going to be the case, why even kind of open it up for them? But I'm curious to see what my fellow councillors would think about this. But I do understand it doesn't fit in that hole of the planning aspect of it. I'm here to represent the residents of that subdivision now, so I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't advocating for what they're expressing to me, and I've heard that loud and clear.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I share the opinion of my colleague, Councillor Sadhu here, and I understand the logic behind what you're suggesting and what's being proposed. However, I want to pick up on a point you mentioned, which is really that you're talking about everything is going to Snyder's Road regardless, so we don't want to overwhelm it. But ultimately, everything is going to choke at some point because everybody's fighting to get to the highway. So honestly, even having 3 exits, 1 exit, it doesn't matter. They're all fighting to get to the exact same road to get on the exact same on-ramp. So I think from the perspective of the residents that live there, they're looking to mitigate the traffic that they're seeing already go down to the schools. And really, it's about pushing this density out the other way because you're going to have a high flow of traffic. And truthfully, I think what supports that idea is really the proposal for the traffic calming measures. I mean, they seem, as much as I welcome traffic calming, I would even welcome these if this neighborhood wasn't even being proposed, but it still seems extreme. Like there's raised intersections, bump outs, there's a lot here to suggest that there will be a high flow of traffic down these roads, and that's why I think these measures are being proposed. So I think it supports the argument the other way, but really it's about what would your client do if we were to try and get through an amendment or a condition of approval that would suggest that these become walkways?
Sorry, what would my client do?
Through the chair, my question is, so if we were to amend this and put in a draft approval condition of making these walkways and not through streets, I guess my question is what do you anticipate the next course of action would be?
Through Madam Mayor, I can't answer that. I don't know how, I haven't discussed that with my client. We have to, first of all, see what the decision is and then decide from there what the course of action is. There are options, as you know, whether we could either accept it or we can either not accept it, and our only course is really to take it to the OLT to rectify that decision. And I'm not suggesting that's the course, but those are the options.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, I'm going to ask the other question the other way is if we force all the traffic out one way to an existing subdivision that has to be, in my mind, I was told it's going to be built first before this is developed, so that access is there. Aren't we doing the same thing to somebody else? It's just basically the old not in my backyard. I have real problems if we're going to say, I want to drive my kids to school, but you can't, you're farther away and you can't drive your kids to school. I don't know. That doesn't seem very fair to me where I come from. That's just, but I'm not living in a subdivision. I got a half-mile lane, so I'll have that as a caveat.
Fair enough. And Councillor, I was kind of thinking along the same lines, as well as not to say that I can predict how the traffic is going to go, but recognizing that knowing the neighboring subdivision to be built that will connect to yours is going to have that kind of designed, almost, I want to call it like a collector's lane, is kind of the proposal. So it may actually be a smoother transition to choose to go through that subdivision, but also to Councillor Cressman's point, by the time that this is developed, that will also be an existing subdivision. I I did have a question in terms of the street stubs, and I know it was mentioned in one of the official planning meetings, so I just want to revalidate that it's for future potential development. The stub at the end of Street 5 and the stub at the end of where it would be Street 1 meets with Isaac Shantz, going on to the additional land that's owned by your client. That's technically agricultural, but within, I believe, the development area. So I just wanted to understand, are those kind of going to be dead-end streets that'll have signs saying this may be future development?
Yes, that's essentially how it would be. I'm not sure how it would be signed, but that's the intention, yes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments at this time, Council? Okay. So we do have another delegate this evening. Thank you very much, Pierre, again for joining us for this one. I would also maybe just throw it out there while people are thinking, because we do technically already have a moved and second motion on the floor. If council's interested in taking up the offer for an amendment to add Z2 zoning to the current Z4 zones to allow for flexibility of singles, that would specifically be on blocks 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15, and 16, which are all currently zoned for multi-residential. I obviously can't table an amendment, but that seemed to be something, unless Mr. Chauvin, I interpreted that incorrectly, but that seemed to be something that you were open to. So that may be an amendment. We could either deal with that now or we can deal with that after. Okay. So you can think about that. Right now, we do have one registered delegate to speak on this item, and that is Alex Sully. Alex, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Mayor, members of Council. My name is Alex Sully. I'm a resident of Baden. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening regarding the proposed North Baden development. First, I want to acknowledge Councillors Chris Wilkinson and Javier Sadu for their willingness to engage with residents, including myself, throughout this process. I appreciate the time they spent listening to my concerns, answering questions, and advocating for meaningful improvements to the proposal and on the behalf of the community. While I recognize that some concessions have been made by Activa, I believe the proposal still falls well short of addressing many of the concerns that residents have consistently raised. One of my primary concerns remains the overall density of the development. While Activa has reduced the maximum building height and converted the multiple residential blocks to townhomes in the current draft, the overall number of residential units remains effectively unchanged. Furthermore, the ability to potentially convert these blocks into condominium apartment buildings through future planning applications leaves many residents concerned that today's concessions could be tomorrow's intensification. From my perspective, these changes appear to be adjustments to form rather than meaningful reductions in density. Density drives profitability, and while I understand that developers must operate as a business, it's pretty difficult to view these revisions as substantial compromises when the overall scale of development is largely intact. In fact, there have been no meaningful concessions made to reduce the overall density of the development. There was changes to building form and height, but the proposed unit count has remained unchanged. The development from last meeting contemplated between 302 to 431 residential units, and the current proposal contemplates between 303 and 433 units. So it went up. Despite changing in building forms, the overall density has increased slightly rather than decreased, which I think is what pretty much everyone here wants. Concerns raised by residents during previous meetings have also not been adequately addressed. One example is Block 1, which is proposed directly behind existing homes, such as my own. Based on the current plans, this block is expected to contain 23 to 27 residential units. By comparison, the area there currently has 16 homes. So this represents approximately 1.5 times the density within essentially the same space, which is a common feature of this proposal. Residents have consistently raised concerns about whether this level of intensification is compatible with the character and scale of surrounding neighborhoods, yet the current proposal does nothing to alleviate those concerns. That said, I also recognize the realities facing council. I appreciate the work that councillors have done to engage with residents and negotiate improvements to this proposal. Growth and development are inevitable, and I recognize that compromise is necessary to move projects forward. That being said, compromise is a two-way street. Residents and council have shown a willingness to be flexible. Many of the changes proposed by Activa appear to be relatively modest when compared to the scale of concerns being raised. From the perspective of many residents, the balance between what the community is being asked to accept and what the developer is willing to concede still feels uneven. I would encourage Activa to view this process as more than simply securing approvals. This is an opportunity to demonstrate that they're committed to being a responsible community partner and to building a development that respects the character and concerns of the neighborhood that surround it. Of all these issues being discussed, I believe the most important is traffic. Additional traffic calming measures are welcome, but they don't address the underlying concern, which is a substantial increase in traffic volume entering established neighborhood streets. I strongly support restricting Jacob Cressman Street and Isaac Shantz Drive to pedestrian and emergency vehicle access only through the installation of emergency barriers. This approach achieves several important objectives, protects existing residential streets from becoming through routes for traffic generated by the new development. Mr. Martin, I believe it was you who said people are going to park as close to the front door as they could. So you take that into consideration when people are driving to their house. They're not going to want to go the road designed for this development. They're going to go the quickest, most effective way possible, which is going to be the road directly beside my house. Having these emergency barriers will preserve the character and safety of established neighborhoods. It directs development-related traffic towards infrastructure intended to serve the new neighborhood. And most importantly, it accomplishes these goals without significantly impacting the overall development yield, which is important to Activa. In my view, if meaningful concessions on density are unlikely, then protecting existing residents from the associated traffic impacts should become the priority. If they're expecting upwards of 400 units, that's easily 1,000 vehicles that will be driving to that neighborhood behind my house, which, if you're asking me, I don't think that's reasonable for current residents with how the infrastructure is set up currently. I also support changing the designation of the multiple residential blocks to better reflect the surrounding neighborhood character. Residents have consistently expressed a desire for development that integrates with Baden's existing form and character, and planning terminology should accurately reflect that intent. Now, I just saw today that there was houses that are proposed behind mine that are significantly taller than my current living arrangements, which brings up questions: are there going to be trees that are tall enough to block out people from staring directly into my backyard? Is there any increase to fence height which could be proposed? Because I don't think anybody wants people staring into their backyard. That's certainly not anything that I want. Finally, I want to emphasize that residents are not opposed to growth. Baden will continue to grow, and growth is necessary. However, growth must be balanced with compatibility, infrastructure capacity, traffic management, in the interest of people who already call this community home. I encourage Council to continue negotiating for improvements wherever possible, and at a minimum, support measures that meaningfully reduce the impact of this development on existing neighborhoods. That's all. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much, Alex. Are there any questions for the delegation? Okay, seeing none, thank you again for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
So Council, I know the idea of bringing forward an amendment was discussed. Did anybody want to bring forward either that amendment I identified or another one? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, I think first and foremost, I know Director Martin wanted to make a comment regarding the zoning in particular, so I'd be interested to hear from him on this, but I do intend to pursue an amendment regarding the zoning applications for blocks 15 and 16.
Director Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. I just wanted to comment, earlier there was a discussion about a number of blocks. So all of the other blocks all that are allowed for street towns already allow for singles as well. So like blocks 7, 8, 9, 10 allow that flexibility. It's just blocks 15 and 16. So if Activa is interested, and I mean, if council directs that as well, it would be as simple as adding the provisions related to singles that are currently contained within Zone 2C to Zone 4. So we would just basically take those provisions and add it to Zone 4. So it's a fairly easy addition to add singles as a permitted use, and then that would be consistent with the other blocks that allow for the street towns.
Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I know I'm just thinking out loud here and on the fly. It may not be exactly perfect, but it appears to be a talking point that was acceptable. So again, I think looking at it, I would like to table that amendment to include that, was it Z2C or B in with the Z4 for blocks 15 and 16 to potentially allow for, again, whether that be single or semi-detached homes, and then hope that Activa and the client sees ultimately the direction of the market at that time. So I would move that.
Okay, so Director Martin, I think, just wants to clarify which zoning that was.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Sonnen. 2 points. Yeah, it would be Zone 2C, and just to clarify that the current zoning doesn't contemplate semi-detached dwellings anywhere within the development. I know that Mr. Chauvin had mentioned that, but none of the zones currently are proposing semi-detached dwellings. We could add that if that was a desire, but it isn't as simple as cutting and pasting from another section because we currently don't have any provisions for semi-detached dwellings in the zoning because that was not proposed. So if that is something that you are wanting to have the developer comment on, then perhaps that's the route. But as it stands right now, we would, from a staff perspective, we don't have any provisions for semis currently within that zoning framework, and so that would take a little bit more fine-tuning to make that determination of regulations.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, so I'm just looking at Section 8, so Zone 2, 2A, 2B, 2C. It does talk about permitted uses essentially being residential building, semi-detached or single detached. So I'll give it a minute, but I would be interested in ensuring that that's there, but I'm just hoping that we're able to get this added this evening.
So the semi-provisions exist in our zoning bylaw, but they aren't in this draft amendment. So we utilize the zoning categories, but reframed the permitted uses to what's proposed. So typically a semi-detached dwelling would be permitted in Zone 3. That's not contemplated by this development, so it's permissive in terms of what's listed in the bylaw. So we aren't currently proposing semi-detached dwellings because that wasn't something the developer was proposing to do.
Through the chair, given the information and conversation here, what I'd be willing to suggest is that understanding the willingness and the receptiveness of the planning proposal here, I would suggest we add the 2C as the additive to Zone 4 to allow for the single. I would be fine not including necessarily the single detached. I think honestly the market will be moving to small single detached personally.
Okay, so there is an amendment that has been moved to add 2C zoning to block 15 and 16, which would allow for, in addition to the multi-residential, the potential for singles to be developed on that site. Again, expectation setting that would be up to the developer and the market at the time. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. Any comments or questions on the amendment? Councillor Cressman.
Yeah, yes, through you, Mayor. Just to make sure it isn't forcing the developer in that direction, it's just giving him additional flexibility depending on market forces.
Correct. Any other comments or questions on the amendment? Seeing none, I will call the question on the amendment. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. So now we have the motion as amended before us. Were there any other comments or questions or amendments, Councillor Sadhu?
Yeah, I just I want to make an amendment on my issue with the through streets. I think there is an opportunity to find a balanced solution that keeps options open in the future while giving reassurances to the current residents that are living in that subdivision. So I would make a motion for an amendment to have Jacob Cressman and Isaac Shantz as emergency exit points and not full through streets, if that sounds...
I would look to Director Martin if that's something feasible that can be done through this bylaw.
Through Madam Strong, I mean, certainly council can provide direction from a staff perspective, and I would look to my colleagues both from an infrastructure services and fire services perspective. There certainly would be a concern eliminating those as road connections for connectivity. In the instance of an emergency, if someone needs to get through fire trucks, great, but the average person can't access an emergency exit. If an alternative has to, one intersection is blocked and they need to get out, it does become problematic for connectivity. Maintenance for snowplow movements, having to turn around at the end of roads versus having a through connection for maintenance purposes. There's a number of reasons outside of just good planning why those road connections should be. So if this is something that council is contemplating, I would look probably for council to ask the questions of my colleagues from both infrastructure services and emergency services as to their comments on that road connectivity. But I would say our opinion is unanimous amongst ourselves from a professional standpoint that those road connectivity is integral to the appropriate development of the site.
Chief and Director Vanderwall, would you like to weigh in on that? Director Vanderwall.
Through the mayor, I would have to concur from an infrastructure services perspective. We would be unable to support this development without additional road connections. It would result in a significant number of properties and residents with only one proper exit, also hinder our abilities for snow removal, which is improved by connectivity. We would also be significantly hampered in our ability if we had to repair infrastructure with only one appropriate egress. It happens at times where we have a blockage of a road, planned or unplanned. The use of emergency egresses is not preferred, so we would definitely strongly encourage that the additional connections remain.
Chief Pipe.
Through the mayor, I would concur that we would need the two access points from an emergency services perspective for our trucks to respond, to have alternate access points when required for various reasons, blockages, weather, just moving trucks in and out. They're big trucks. They need good access routes. We would support having the two connections.
Okay. So an amendment has been put forward by Councillor Sadhu. Councillor Wilkinson, are you seconding it? Okay. Did you want to speak to the amendment as well?
Through the chair, I am looking to second this because I can cite a specific example where we do see these type of access points. It happens on Wilmot Line in accessibility to a neighborhood in Waterloo where they have remote controlled essentially emergency access points. So I know they exist. I know they're functional. If anything, I think it would be well worth it to at least give it a try. And then if we find down the road it's not functioning as we foresee, potentially look at changing things around. But I think, again, out of respect for the folks that live there and are looking for mitigating efforts, it is certainly well worth it to make this amendment.
Okay. So an amendment has been moved and seconded to make both Isaac Shantz Drive and Jacob Cressman Drive emergency access points versus throughways as currently proposed. Were there any other questions or comments on the amendment? Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, just to clarify, my understanding is that there has been a traffic study done on this, so I guess I'm simply saying out loud what's already there, but maybe Director Vanderwall or Director Martin, if you could confirm that.
Yep, through Mayor Salonen. Yeah, the TIS that was completed did contemplate multiple points of access. As you heard from Mr. Chauvin, one of the further comments from the consultant with respect to the idea of removing these as through streets was it removes that the intent is to distribute traffic through multiple points of access as opposed to loading it in one area. Certainly the intent of the development through traffic calming is to push the primary portion of that traffic through the collector road network that's proposed, but allowing choice for both current neighborhoods to access this new neighborhood and vice versa. That road integration provides multiple points of choice, and that was something that was raised as an important piece of the traffic design from the consulting team.
Councillor Martin?
So through you, Mayor Salonen, so I guess my concern to council would be that we're not planners, and our planners have done their job and brought forward the report. So that would be my concern. I cannot see myself voting in favor of this amendment.
Any other questions or comments on the amendment? I do just want to note on it, I also am leaning more so towards planning professionals and the traffic study. Also, I mean, I've lived in this connecting neighborhood over on McFadden Street for 22 years, and frankly, I mean, we didn't even want to see the people who live back there now, not that we don't as individuals, but the planning and development side. And I know that neighbors at one point wanted to turn our street into emergency access only because it is a throughway. However, I've also known since I was 10 that these streets were going to be open to access points. I can absolutely appreciate the amount of traffic and density going through. These is going to be a dramatic change from what currently is existing on those stubs. However, at the same time, this was designed on a whole to be like that. It's unfortunate that the market has led to it being a 20-year gap. But I really would struggle not having that consistent access in a way that is designed in a proper subdivision plan. And I still lean towards, based off of how the design of the neighboring site is supposed to be, it probably will be an easier way both in and out of the community. Again, that's an assumption on my understanding from traffic studies of how it's supposed to work, but that collector's lane should be probably the preferred path based off of actual speed and not having to stop at multiple stop signs, as well as if the other traffic calming goes in place. Councillor Wilkinson, I am familiar with the site that you were talking about where Waterloo borders on us. I would also note, though, that that's dramatically different, that it's not a subdivision attaching to an existing subdivision. It is going on to rural roads that at the time, none of it was paved, going on to a not even tar and chip, but just a gravel road. So although, yes, they do exist, I would say the context is slightly different, at least from my perspective. But I've certainly heard from neighbors who share and continue to share these concerns, and even I'm one that we know we're going to see increased traffic on our street, but I just really would struggle from a good planning practice to be able at this time to deem it as only emergency access, but again, really looking at how we can target getting less density back in that area while still also presenting different housing options so that people can enter the market who, frankly, a lot already exist in the community and are looking for other options. So just wanted to share my comments there, but Councillor Cressman.
My only comment is 60 years ago, through you, Mayor, when I was going to high school, there was a whole lot less traffic on Snyder's Road.
All right. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, the only final comment I can make is I understand that there's been projections and models done based on the traffic study. However, I would argue, given the level of professionals that exist in the neighborhood back here, when the traffic count was done, a vast majority of them were working from home. So I would question a lot of the data that was collected and whether it was truly relevant to what we see today, where I would suggest that there might have been a revision in some forecasting in early 2025. Most of the world is still working from home at a professional level. Only recently have we started to see the migration back to an office. So that would be my only last piece to contemplate, is the traffic study truly representative of what we expect to see based on this, hence why wanting to make this change.
All right. So we have an amendment before us. I don't see any other comments or questions on it. I call the question. All those in favor? And those opposed? And that is defeated. So we still have the amendment, or sorry, we still have the motion as amended on the zoning density changes. Was there anything else that council wanted to either make amendments or contemplate or discuss before voting? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor and all those opposed? And that is carried. And we will now jump to the other item that I had mentioned earlier that we would bring forward, which is report 12.4, and this is the Petersburg Drinking Water System Local Improvement Act charges, which is report IS-2025-42. The recommendation is that this report for the Drinking Water Local Improvement Act be received for information, and that staff be authorized to proceed under the provisions of Section 6 of the Municipal Act to initiate the local improvement process for installation of water main and water-related apparatuses and as part of the Petersburg reconstruction project, including giving notice to intention to the public and owners of the lots liable to be specifically charged, and that property owners of local improvement charges be offered a repayment option at a rate of Bank of Canada prime rate plus 1.5% for up to a 20-year period due to the time of finalized construction costs. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Sadhu, and I will turn it over to Director Vanderwall to present this report.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, this report looks at initiating the process for Local Improvement Act in relation to the Petersburg project. Staff are primarily looking for direction as it relates to the additional 23 units affected by the construction, which would provide direction for construction intent to add a service for these properties and eventual intent to recover the cost pursuant to the local improvement for the water main. I look forward to any questions on this. Thank you.
All right, we'll turn it over to Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair. In reading this report, Director Vanderwall, I want to direct this to you. What's really being suggested here is that this is contemplating two potential options on the table, but not necessarily locking in or solidifying them as the final billing breakdowns or properties that will be potentially paying for this through the Local Improvement Act. What I'm reading is that this is an act to essentially authorize construction, understand that the funding for the water system portion is coming from a Local Improvement Act, and these are potential options that are being explored. And then there will be a further report coming back to council. I'm seeing early 2027 regarding what the final local improvement ask could be. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, it is, I would say, mostly correct. The final costing is probably not to be done until, I would say, 2028, when we expect the full construction. We are looking at, per our other report, to start construction. Since we are looking at starting construction on the regional roads, we are also looking then for some feedback from council on whether or not we are providing the service for the additional 23 units and how that would go. The rest of it, yes, is quite correct. We will be bringing back something. We will be going through the contract administration, the cost as it goes forward. But yes, those costs would not be finalized until the project is finalized. So we would be looking at carrying the costs until that time.
Councillor Wilkinson.
And through the chairs, is fair to say when reading the report and looking at, I know I don't want to jump back to the construction 100%, but there's a pretty significant contingency piece built in there. If we anticipate that, or we run into zero problems, it's possible we could see that number be significantly lower.
Through the mayor, there is a very healthy contingency on this project that was built in primarily because of the nature of this project. We did not want to be on the other side of that equation when we came back saying it is higher based on it going over. You are correct. There are never zero contingencies on a project. However, the amount of contingency there is very healthy, and I would expect it to come back on the other side. That being said, when we go through the contingency, if it is all water-based contingency, we may use significantly less of the contingency, but it may all be directed towards this side of the project.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, if anybody else wants to speak on this, please stop me now. But I have a particular interest in this project. So I will say this much: in chatting with a lot of the residents, and I know Director Vanderwall, you've directly conversed with a lot, I would suggest that this is the most logical approach, is what is being proposed by staff to include the additional 23 dwellings, simply from the logical standpoint that we have the infrastructure running in front of those homes, and we don't want to create an inequity in the neighborhood where some paid for the water infrastructure and then some get to access it for free or a much reduced cost down the road. So I think the idea that you're suggesting everybody pays for the infrastructure that runs in front of their home is probably the most logical, and I would certainly be of the opinion that I think everybody on Notre Dame and Snyder's should be at least afforded a connection or a hookup point, whether or not they choose to utilize it. But I think that would be the most logical.
Director Vanderwall.
I would like to make one clarification that down the road, a connection cost, we would not recoup the money, but they would still be a significant cost because they would be doing open cut at that point. I would estimate a low-end connection cost after we are done is probably in the range of $15,000 to $20,000, simply because their methodology will be working through the region, doing an open cut, coming to the main, whereas we will be open and being a torpedo across the road. So our costs, incremental costs, when we can do this at our time, is significantly less than what they would see at that time.
And just for clarification on that, so if we were including the additional 23, we would then be putting that connection line right up to their property line, and then it would be up to them to actually connect?
Through the mayor, yes, that is correct. We would be providing a curb stop at property line.
Any additional questions or comments? Councillor Cressman.
Through you, Mayor. Would we not be able to torpedo right into their basement? I mean, having done it on my own property when I went through it under a stone foundation and et cetera, if you stop, at some point in time, you're going to have to open a trench to get under your foundation or whatever. So I'm just wondering, if you're going to get it to a curb stop, you might as well get it all the way. I know you have to have a curb stop, don't get me wrong, but.
Through the mayor, that is, so technically, yes, they could continue the torpedo through. We generally stop at property line and do not try to do more work on private property than we need to. If they had engaged at the same time that we've got a pit open for the curb stop to continue a torpedo into the basement with the plumbing permits, we would have no reason to object to that. We have no control over that, so you're not wrong. It's just not something that we would include within our project.
Additional questions or comments? Councillor Cressman.
So, through you, Mayor, just so I'm reading this properly, the way I read it is you had the 62 for sure, you had 3 of the 23 that were interested, and what we're saying is the other ones that weren't interested were not giving you any choice, because this is the most opportune time to torpedo, et cetera, and get you lined up. So what is their attitude about them being dinged for the significant fee, do you think, or have you had conversations?
Through the mayor, admittedly, I don't think their attitude's going to be great to receiving a bill for what we're talking about, $25,000. It is, in our mind, the appropriate thing to do when we are going through at this time with one construction to provide the curb stops over to the other side. I'm not sure I can add more to it than that.
Councillor Crespo.
Yes, I'm going to draw on the memory of our long-standing employee wondering about what happened in St. Agatha and New Dundee when the water systems went in there. It was basically, if it, you have no choice but to hook up. It was always my understanding.
CAO Grafka.
Yeah, and I believe that was the history of Baden and New Hamburg as well. The requirement was when services are made available, you connect and you pay the cost of those services rather than the entire tax base. Again, I wasn't obviously alive for New Hamburg and Baden's, but certainly that's the recollection. St. Agatha, whatever that was, 20 years ago, and New Dundee was, I believe, mid-'80s, both of which I was alive for. But anyways, I don't know if that's helpful to the conversation.
It is, but I'm half disappointed that even though you weren't alive, you don't have the exact historical knowledge there based off of all of the history you do have. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, if I'm not mistaken, through the conversation too, it's conceivable that through an EA plan for next year, the region could very well come along and suggest that the private wells are potentially affecting their publicly owned well. So it's totally in the realm of possibility they could force everyone who fronts on the infrastructure onto the system through their own methods, if I'm not mistaken. Is that accurate?
Through the mayor, I am not aware of a mechanism other than if they found there was a problem with the wells, but I would have to reach out to the region about that. So I can't comment whether or not that is 100% accurate or not. My understanding is unless there's a contamination, the region would not have the ability to force it, but I am not positive on that.
Through the other well issues we have, that's also my understanding. The region, as a take water permit under the province, they're responsible. If they're causing the impact to the other wells, they're responsible for it, not the private well owner being responsible to the region. Councillor Cressman.
Just through you, Mayor, are we aware whether this the well capacity that exists is capable of handling the additional 23? Pardon?
Through the mayor, we have discussed this briefly, not officially with the region. We don't have any concerns at this time, but we will get that officially if that is the desire. We are not aware that there is a concern with the capacity for the additional 23 at this point.
Any additional comments or questions on this? Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, I would make a comment. I think ultimately I'm leaning towards, again, what staff is suggesting here, but I would be very curious when this comes back, whether that be this term of council or next, because it certainly sounds like it will likely be next by the time things are finally decided. One thing that's been discussed and contemplated, and I'm curious to understand maybe what is possible, so I'd like it explored at least through our financial representatives, would be if the township were to front the money on behalf of the additional 23 and essentially pay for it to happen and then keep that in a reserve or a hold over the property, accruing interest to suggest that if and when you ever hook up, you will have to pay this portion. May obviously be a cost to the general taxpayer there, but I would be curious to maybe understand what that could look like and if that is a possibility within a local improvement levy.
Director Gerwal.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So we've done some rough math in terms of commenting on whether or not that's possible under the local improvement charges. We can get back to council on that. But just based on the math, using the figures in option 2 of the table at about $25,850 per dwelling, coming out to about $600,000 in total. If the township were to carry these costs at an assumed 4.5% interest rate, we'd be looking at $71,000 in interest over 5 years, $145,000 over 10 years, or $224,000 in interest over 15 years. Looking at total cash flow for interest and principal, it'd be $133,000 over 5 years, $74,000 per year over 10 years, or $55,000 per year over 15 years. So based on the township's current annual levy, that would be an impact of 0.84% over 5 years, 0.47% over 10 years, or 0.35% of the levy over 15 years.
Through the chair, Director Gerwal, thank you very much for that. That is much appreciated. Thank you.
And I think, yes, everybody thinks the answer is no based off of that. Councillor Cressman.
I was suggesting when they got to 15 years, we could call it the Woolwich Amendment, what happened in Breslau, but maybe I better not go there.
I just want clarity because I know some of the report refers to it as prime plus 1.5 and some of it defines as the 4.5% based off of current prime. Would that be a fluctuating price as prime changes, or is that locked in once the final numbers are verified before the project starts?
Through you, Mayor, so when we approached the Region of Waterloo for financing this project, we will receive an interest rate at that time, and so we'll be using that rate once we receive it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, seeing none. So staff's recommendation is for option 2 at this point in time. I know there's been discussion around that, but want to confirm before we vote that people understand that, and if they want to change, I would suggest now would be the time to do so. And while you're contemplating that, we still have a delegate to also speak. So we will invite up Phil Welland. Thank you very much, Phil, for... Yes. Oh.
Through the chair, I did have a point of clarity, is that reading the recommendation, I just want to be 100% clear. I don't know that it necessarily suggests option 2. I know reading the report, that is preferred, but I believe it is just to initiate the local improvement process and then give notice of intention, but I believe it's just meant to come back in 2027, not necessarily signifying option 1 or 2 at this point.
Yes, sorry. My reason for identifying option 2 is so that those additional 23 homeowners can be notified that this is at least the conversation that's been had at council, not necessarily that's what council approved. I should have clarified that when I noted option 2, though.
This is very good.
Sorry, now we will invite up Phil Welland. Thank you very much, Phil, for joining us this evening and for sticking through all of the other planning items today. You will have 7 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. It is well past my bedtime, so this is certainly probably past some of yours as well. Excuse me. So I'm glad you guys touched on a couple of things. I have somewhat of a plan, but of course, every time I do this, it seems to change based on feedback and what's going on here. I did send an email this morning that summarized most of my points, so I'm not going to rehash all of that. I'd like that the mayor talked about notifying these 23 residents, because I don't think, other than a few people in the neighborhood that happen to know that this was on the agenda for tonight, that this is even an option. It was discussed, I believe, at the Public Information Center. I think that's fairly important. And also for the 62, because some of us are like, yay, we're paying way less. I mean, the original number, which was like in the 50s, is already whittled down quite a bit. So that's great. So thank you to staff for working on that and getting that there. But I think the communication piece is a big part of it. And I don't know that it has been, I don't want to say adequate, but like last year, I think, when we were here and Jeff Mullins was still here, we talked about how this was different than a regular infrastructure project because residents are being asked to pay for it out of their own pockets or at least finance it or whatever shape or form. And I think there needs to be potentially like a different standard of communication to people about even ahead of a meeting where something like this is even on the table. You know, I have neighbors behind me and next to me that are not on the system. The weekend, sort of, do we tell them about it? Do we not? Like, it's not really our job to really inform them of it and potentially have them in a rage before even people have, before council has even voted a direction. So I think that's something that we should, or that as a resident, I would encourage staff and council to pursue a bit differently than has been done, I guess, because it isn't regular infrastructure. One question I did have, which I know this is not a back and forth, but is the prime plus whatever rate or 4.5 rates, is that a rate that the township is earning money on top of that, or is that just like a cost? This is something that was interested, that was in my email as well. So yeah, I would say, and I would personally support, and probably most of the 62 would also support, including the 23 from a logical financial point of view. And I can also imagine the majority of the 23 being very against this. So however this is handled by staff and council might sort of determine what kind of mood is in the neighborhood in the summer. So I think that's something that needs to be considered seriously. So yeah, I mean, that's on this item. I did add some things about the sidewalk, which I know is not being discussed here, but I'm just going to say them because I got 4 minutes left and I put it in my email. In the last council meeting where I was here, we had, or at least I brought up some concerns about the sidewalks and the AODA requirements. And I think the next day, actually I drove home in the dark from here and I was like, hey, the streetlights are on this side. And the final design is actually on the side opposite our streetlights. And if anybody's driven through a neighborhood in the evening, our street lighting is sort of spaced out at a further increment than like it is in Baden. So it is somewhat dark, which is fine. It's not negative, but if we're going to put a sidewalk in my opinion, it should at least be following that sidewalk, which is the longer path, which was option 2. Again, I realize this is sort of, in progress, but these are the comments. Option 2 also had a better distribution of work for winter maintenance, and so on and so forth. As a corner lot, I'm selfishly complaining about this because it is a lot to potentially be doing. And at the last meeting, I think on the 22nd of March, I believe that the mayor mentioned that you could potentially look at waiving sidewalk clearing requirements in the winter or lessening them or do things like this. So I'd encourage staff, or how feasible that is, I don't know, or some sort of financial support or having the township do some of that, whatever the thing is, because it is a big amount of workload. Moving to the other side of the road is still workload for other residents. I'm well aware of that. But it is less per house, let's say. I don't know, I'm just going to say that. And then there are also design choices, and I do have a meeting with Mr. Van der Waal and his team in July about these, but on some, again, it's in my property at the edge where certain trees and a lot of grading is required. Certain trees may be pruned or removed, and a lot of grading is required. When across the streets, there is way less grading to be done and no trees. So those are some choices, I think, that could also ratchet these costs down and alleviate some of my own personal concerns. Anyways, so that's all I have for today.
Thank you very much, Phil, for coming in. Were there questions for Phil? Okay, seeing none, again, we really appreciate you. I know it's been a particularly long meeting tonight, so thank you. I did want to ask clarity on Phil's point about the interest rate cost and that pass through to the resident, if you just want to speak to that, Director.
Through you, Mayor. So the interest rate prime plus 1.5% is just a rough estimate in terms of the interest rate that the township would pay if it were to take on debt to fund this project.
So for clarity, we wouldn't be making money on interest. It's what we're being charged for carrying that
Correct.
debt.
There's no intent to make any sort of profit on that. It's simply a cost recovery.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, Phil. Okay, councillors. So we do have our motion already moved and seconded. Were there any other questions, comments, or amendments? The only one I'd maybe suggest doing, I know I had noted it, making the assumption if we were talking about option 2 as a way forward that those 23 houses would be contacted. Perhaps it's worth putting a specific amendment in, even after hearing Phil's comments and a few of the other neighbors' comments, of including direct communications to each 62 original homes and the additional 23 homes of what was discussed at tonight's meeting. I'm not looking for full minutes, but just an awareness that there's potential impacts to your home. And then also perhaps, and I will go to staff in a moment, but also perhaps then suggesting in advance of this coming back for another decision point that, like, say a flyer to each of those potentially impacted homes goes out. And I know staff have done really great communications, so I just wanted to note it based off of feedback I've heard, but certainly, Director, if you have comments that you would like to add.
Through the Mayor, it is our general practice after the award of a contract to put out notices to every resident. Items like this would be included in this notice, so it would not require an additional piece of correspondence, but we would ensure that this piece of information is included in the notice that will go hand delivered to every one of the, what are we at, 85? I don't remember the exact number, but the full numbers. So that would be there for that.
That's great. Would that also include when this comes back? Because I appreciate this has now been a while in the making, and I know even some people have sold properties in between. So would it include any form of communication prior, like I'm thinking even a week out, just as notice of this item is coming up on the agenda? And I'm kind of just thinking little flyers to each of those 85 homes. Curious if that's included in the project.
Through the Mayor, that would not generally be included in the first one, but if it is the desire of council, when we are certain of a date, we can ensure that our construction inspector puts another notice out saying that this is coming back to council. The reason I'm not confident we can put it on the same one because I'm not certain when this is coming back, so I need the first one to go out and the second one when it's appropriate.
Yes, and I was thinking of it as a separate second item, just so that when it does come back, people don't need to be watching. I mean, you should watch what's coming up on the agenda anyways. However, you don't need to be watching every single one, knowing that you will get a little flyer to your house saying this is coming back in a week's time or something like that to council for decision. Does that make sense, Director, what I'm asking for?
Through the Mayor, yes, that makes sense. We will ensure there is another notice delivered by the construction inspector at the appropriate time to inform them of the follow-up meeting.
Very good. With that, then I think, unless anyone has huge opposition to that, that could be taken as direction instead of a formal amendment. Okay, very good. So then we just have the motion as it's currently on the floor. Councillor Cressman.
Yes, just so I'm clear on this, and not the question of the 23, but the construction in front of the 23 actually occurs this summer as compared to the 62, which occurs next summer. That's the way I read the report? Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, that is my understanding that the regional roads will be the first roads done, which is the inclusion of the 23.
So that, through you, Mayor, so in my mind, informing the 23 post-haste is extremely important because, you know, they likely weren't within the loop or within it. So I guess that's where I'm, depending on how we vote, but anyhow.
Director Vanderwall.
Through the Mayor, first of all, I would concur that our notice should go out very quickly. Secondly, I will point out that at our last Public Information Center, the exact date of which I don't recall, this was noted as one of the options that would go forward. So it was noted that we had 3 options there, right? The 62 plus whomever signs on, or everyone fronting. And I can pull out some of this correspondence at that point. That was one of the options. We did not know at that time which option we were recommending, but it was noted at that time.
Okay. Seeing no other questions or comments, it's already been moved and seconded, so I would call the question. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Now, in case you are following where we left off from our regular agenda, we are headed back to section 10, correspondence. Council did get correspondence circulated this morning, and that will be added on to the official minutes. So we have consent agenda items. Were there any items or reports that councillors wanted to pull from the consent agenda? Councillor Cressman.
I haven't got the exact number, but it's the terminology of the leaving till next budget cycle, the revenue poobah, whatever his official title is. I was wondering, just we have the funding for the assistant treasurer, and I guess what I'm wondering is it appropriate to give direction that to the next council there is some type of look? I think if I might as well say it the way I was going to say it and thought about it was, I think if it was suggested that the salary that was set aside for the assistant treasurer would have been moved over and put into that position at last council meeting, it might have had a chance of going forward. But since that wasn't part of the proposal, I'm wondering whether they could jointly look at those 2 positions and we get an understanding of, is there duties that would cross one way or the other, whether one salary rate. And I'm just thinking it would be helpful to have that delineated and investigated. So I was just reading the crowd last meeting, and I didn't raise it as an issue, or the council last meeting, but I was just thinking it might be helpful the next go around to have clear understanding of those 2 roles, why they have to be separated, if they could be transitioned into one, etc.
Director.
Thank you, through your mayor. So the deputy treasurer role is already budgeted and is being recruited for separately. So the manager of revenue position was a net new position being recommended by KPMG. And so that would be slightly reorganizing the finance department if that position were approved between a revenue stream and then a cost and a reporting stream, essentially. And so the manager of revenue position at the time of the report was intended to be funded through an operating reserve, and then it would be sent for consideration in the 2027 budget.
All right. Any other questions or comments on 11.7, which is the manager of revenue, or some other such wording that Councillor Cressman rebranded it to? Not seeing any. Were there any other consent agenda items that councillors wanted to pull then at this time? Okay, not seeing any. I would look for a mover and a seconder to pass our consent agenda items, which is 11.1 through to 11.10. Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin, and all those in favor. And that carries unanimously. Maybe we should do consent at the end all the time. The long meeting. So on to back to our reports. We do need to still cover 12.1, and the recommendation is that report COR-2026-14, Accessibility Advisory Committee 2026 to 2030 term be received for information, and that council request to join the City of Kitchener's Accessibility Advisory Committee as an affiliate member municipality effective with the new term of council commencing on November 15th, 2026. 2026. May I have a mover for that? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman. And I will turn it over to Clerk Jager to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Council, this report recommends that the Township request participation in the City of Kitchener's Accessibility Advisory Committee as an affiliate member municipality for the next term of Council. This recommendation is a result of regional discussions among local municipalities. The other townships are aligned on this approach, having already approved similar recommendations. Staff view this model as an opportunity to continue collaborating with neighboring municipalities while maintaining local representation and meeting the Township's obligations under AODA. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on this? Councillor Cressman.
Realizing that might not be as clear as I once was earlier in the meeting, through you, Mayor, I was surprised to say they didn't want us as part of the committee, but they would take us on as an affiliate member. So I was trying to understand what the difference was being part of Kitchener's committee as an affiliate. So it's just, we're at arm's length. We have no voting privileges.
Through the Mayor to Council. So I would say there's just some different terminology. This is the City of Kitchener's Accessibility Advisory Committee, and that's their terminology for opening the door for opportunity for our township to participate, and the intent and hope is to still have a local representative from our township participate on the committee.
And just to add on to that, it's actually a real benefit for us not needing to have our staff run an entire different committee and utilize the City of Kitchener, allowing us to be an affiliate as their staff do administer it.
Yes, I did see the benefits, but I saw a certain inconsistency in what they were doing, and I wanted to understand.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? That carries unanimously. We've already dispensed with 12.2. That brings us to 12.3, and the recommendation on this one is that report FIN-2026-04, 2026 first quarter operating results be received for information. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Cressman, and I will invite Director Gerwal to introduce this report.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. This report presents the Township's unaudited financial results for the first quarter ending March 31st, 2026. Overall, the Township reported an adjusted operating surplus for the quarter. As noted in the report, many of the variances identified in the first quarter are timing related and reflect the seasonal nature of Township operations, staffing vacancies and recruiting timelines, development activity, winter maintenance costs, and the timing of capital project expenditures and related recoveries. Favorable variances were reported across several departments, primarily due to lower personnel and operating expenditures, while other departments experienced variances associated with seasonal activity levels and revenue timing. Overall, staff are not identifying any significant financial concerns at this time. Staff will continue to monitor revenues, expenditures, staffing levels, capital project progress, and broader economic conditions throughout the year, and will report any significant financial pressures, risks, or opportunities through future quarterly financial updates. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Director. I just want to say I was really excited to see this come through and that Council's starting to get regular reporting again from the financial department. So thank you to you and your team for that. We'll go to Councillor Martin first.
Through you, Mayor Sallin, I realize that Director Graywell, you're cautiously using that S word surplus. And the other day when I mentioned it to you, again, you expressed the caution. So I hear the caution, but I still think it's a great thing that we can use the S word of surplus.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Director Graywell. I mentioned it to you earlier. I was pleased to see this. I think I was used to seeing this historically at every committee I ever sat on, and I commend you for that. I guess the question that I had is that on the revenue side, you haven't factored in the tax increases that are coming on any of the revenue on any of these, because it's the first quarter, we didn't have the tax increase included, correct?
Through you, Mayor, so we factored in a rough estimate of the annual levy at the time, and that was recorded in Q1, so that will be slightly refined in the Q2 and Q3 reporting, but generally it's pretty much in line with what we would expect.
Any other questions or comments on this report? Okay, seeing none, again, this is to receive for information. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. We have also dispensed with 12.4. So that's all of our reports, and now we have bylaws 13.1 through to 13.7. I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Sadhu, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. We do have a notice of motion. I know Councillor Dunstall had originally brought it forward, but I understand that somebody else is willing to move. Councillor Martin, you're going to be moving it. Is there a seconder for this motion? Seconded by Councillor Cressman. Would either of you like to speak to it, or did Lillian provide any words?
Yes, through you, Mayor Salonen. I'll be brief given the time. Just to say that it's an important issue. The flag has been raised, and it's wonderful that the flag was designed here in the township. And Tara Held and Scott Dunstall, and also Community Care Concepts. They were represented here earlier. They were involved in the designing and making up of that flag. So the motion is there. Do you want me to read it, or?
I think all of council has seen the motion, so I think we're okay with that.
Okay, so the motion stands.
Very good. It's been moved and seconded. Councillor Cressman, did you want to?
Through you, Mayor, since I fit the demographic, I'm very much in favor.
Very good. Any other questions or comments on the motion? I did just want to comment, if you haven't already seen it, the seniors flag is currently flying, and we did have a flag raising at the start of the month, but it's actually a really beautiful flag that was designed specifically to acknowledge Seniors Month, and it was done locally. So that's pretty cool that we're actually the first community that I'm aware of to be flying a flag in recognition of Seniors Month. With that, I would call the vote. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. On to announcements. I'm first going to turn it over to Chief Pipe, as I believe there's some acknowledgements on training accomplishments in our fire department.
Thank you, Mayor. As Council is aware, in 2022, the Province of Ontario enacted legislation that requires all firefighters in the Province of Ontario to be certified to National Fire Protection Association standards. Those standards are based on the services offered by the municipality, as the certification requirements are also based on the level of service that we offer fire service as a municipality. So whether you're a career firefighter or a volunteer firefighter, you have to be certified by July 1st, 2026. So on behalf of our volunteer firefighters, I am proud to report that our fire department has met these mandatory requirements. I'd also like to note, this represents a tremendous amount of work on behalf of our volunteer firefighters, and it represents the dedication our volunteer firefighters have to this community. It clearly demonstrates the caliber of people that we have volunteering in this fire service, and I'm very proud to be numbered among them.
Well said, Chief. Thank you very much. And yes, a huge congratulations to all of our volunteer firefighters. I know it was mandatory, but the fact that you're willing to stick it out and continue to show up and serve our community is really greatly appreciated. I did also want to say a thank you to our 9 crossing guards for another safe school year, as this is the last week of school. And of course, happy summer to all students, teachers, and staff in the schools as you guys head out, hopefully, for a great summer ahead. And now, my last announcement is a bittersweet one, but it is acknowledging Elaine Bender's retirement after 33, almost 34 years with the Township of Wilmot. For those that don't know Elaine, you probably do know her and just don't realize it. Very much she is an institution within Wilmot Township, and most certainly her shoes will not be filled, although we are excited for the new staff who are coming on board. But Elaine has given so much to the community over time and often has been our frontline voices. If you ever call the township and press 0, it's always Elaine who's on the other end and friendly and happy to help you out, even if it's not a problem directly related to her work. And really a true testament to Elaine was on Friday, staff hosted a really fabulous retirement party for her, and thank you to all staff who organized that. And there were many retired staff and elected officials, as well as current officials who were all there. Unfortunately, I was away at a board meeting, but it was a really wonderful evening, or I guess afternoon, and it's really just a small token of our appreciation to Elaine and all of her work for the township. You will be missed, but I learned the most exciting news, which was announced on Friday, that Elaine will still be answering the phones, as her voice recording will be welcoming you to the township when you call. So you still get to at least hear her lovely sounds, and we look forward to this next phase for you, Elaine. But thank you for everything that you've done for the township. With that, are there any other announcements? Councillor Martin.
So just reminding people that Canada Day is a week from Wednesday. Starts out with this is all at the Norm S. Hill Park and Fairgrounds. Sunrise ceremony that will be at sunrise. It's often around 6:37 in that time frame, led by Crow Shield Lodge. 1 p.m. are the opening ceremonies, and then all of council is taking part in serving cake to the community. So the first 800 people get cake. We have enough cake for that, and so hope everybody can come. And then there is music throughout the day, and at the very end is fireworks. So,
thank you very much, Councillor. Any other announcements this evening? Okay.
One final announcement, if it interests anyone. Both Councillor Martin and I are participating in the dunk tank, so bring your best aim and arm. Let's see it happen.
Very good. I recommend wearing waterproof sunscreen, because my time in the dunk tank, I got quite the sunburn. So, but it should be a great day out with the community. With that, I'd be looking for a mover and a seconder of the confirmatory bylaw. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? And adjournment, Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? That carries unanimously. Have a great evening, everyone.